Good morning, friends. It's a pleasure to welcome you all with the wonderful weather, Ahmedabad winter. Our chief guest, Shri Jagdish Swaroop, who is the Deputy Registrar of Copyrights from New Delhi, from the Ministry of Commerce. Mr. Vijay Trivedi, the sponsor of our center, the Vijay Trivedi AMA IPR Academy, and also heading the Vijay Trivedi and Associates, one of the very old firms in this profession. Our distinguished speakers of all the sessions who will of course be introduced in their respective sessions. The delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to welcome you all on the 13th IP Summit. I'm feeling nostalgic. I think 2007 we started, and over the years, and wonderful participation. And it's so also nice to see some speakers coming over the years. Like today we have Mr. T. Jim from Singapore, who was there very much in the first summit. And then Mr. Greg from Clark West, he'll also be there each year. Where's Greg? Yeah, okay, yeah, there is. And of course, not forgetting Professor Vivekanand, who has also been coming all the years. So we have a wonderful lineup of speakers. And the theme for today's 13th IP Summit is very interesting. IPR, tracing its evolution in the digital era. Now, the moment you talk of digital era, you know, all these technological terms, they start coming to you, like the state of the art technologies, not only in the IT field, but in all the fields across, you know. And in fact, IT, as you are aware, is a change agent and even a catalyst for all the different technologies. Then again, in the digital era, we have a highly connected world. Then besides fundamental research, we have a lot of innovation and technical startups. Then again, when you talked of technology, all these terms, of course, there's a topic by itself. You right from your blockchain to artificial intelligence and machine learning, deep learning, and so on. Of course, quantum computing, which is playing a major role. And most important, the knowledge turnover, which itself is a subject by itself. What I mean is that the rate of obsolescence over the years due to these innovations is going very high. And in fact, the social scientists are concerned that how humankind will cope with this change, because it's a very fast-changing world. And that reminds me of, you know, Alvin Toffler's words, you know, when he said that one should always, you know, learn, unlearn, and relearn. So that will continue. Coming back to our summit, you know, innovation is a critical component of the global competitive world, and patent is its currency. Patents can be sold, licensed, and valued for mergers and acquisitions, as well as joint ventures. The number of patents filed and granted is a recognition of a country's scientific and technical prowess within the community of nations. China has within a decade overtaken the US as the #1 country in innovation by filing and granting the largest number of patents, as against China's 412,000 patents in 2018. India's record is 12,400, you know, and 90% of them have been granted to foreign multinationals. So we have a long way to go and challenges. The path to patents is paved with research and funding. Indian government companies, including startups, universities, and research institutes, need to direct their attention towards generating more patents if India has to emerge as a hub of inventiveness. To start with, we should increase its investment in R&D. India spends about 0.7% of its GDP in the year 2016-17. Meanwhile, the Japan, US, and China, Japan spent 3.2%, China spent 2.8%, the US spent 2.8%, and China spent 2.8% of their GDP respectively, you know. And now India wants to increase its budget to 2% of R&D by 2020, that's this year. All stakeholders must ensure that this target is reached. This annual summit, 13th in the series, would empower and inspire our youth and the corporates to move towards an innovative patent regime. We have a good pool of experts, highly distinguished persons, who will address and interact different aspects of IP. Special sessions have been kept to understand international issues like copyright issues in Canada, digitalization, IP rights and enforcement systems in the ASEAN countries, and so on. With the level of highly experienced speakers from India and abroad, I'm sure you will greatly benefit from this year's summit. And I'd like to express my gratitude to Mr. Vijay Trivedi and his son Jatin Bhai and the entire team of Vijay Trivedi Associates, for their continuous support. They were not only the sponsors of the center, but each year they've been nurturing this activity, the IP Summit and the other talks we held with lining up wonderful speakers and a lot of other inputs. Incidentally, this year, the Vijay Trivedi firm is celebrating its 50 years of practice. That is an achievement by itself. So congratulations to the whole team, and I wish you a very interesting deliberation. And today we have with us as our chief guest Mr. Jagdish Swarup, who has kindly consented to be our chief guest and with his inaugural address. And as I mentioned before, currently he is the Deputy Registrar Copyrights in the Ministry of Commerce at Delhi, and he holds a master's degree in law and contemporary world history. I'll very briefly introduce to him before he takes over for his inaugural address. He started his career as an advocate in 1984, and Sri Swarup had practiced for 5 years in the Lucknow bench of the Allahabad High Court, and then joined the central government and worked in various departments in the legal and the quasi-judicial posts. He had participated in various national and international training, workshops, seminars, conferences, and discussion organized by the government of India, the governments of Japan, Singapore, South Korea, Vietnam, and also the World IPO, that's the WIPO organization at Geneva. Before I hand him over, I'd like to welcome Mr. Jagdish Swarup with a bouquet of flowers and a memento. I'll request Mr. Padmin Puch, who is heading our Extension Service Committee, to welcome Mr. Vijay Trivedi with a bouquet of flowers. Thank you, Padmin. I now request Mr. Swarup to deliver his inaugural address, and I'm sure you'll enjoy each of the sessions during the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Radia. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm rather feel delighted and lucky to be part of this 13th Annual Intellectual Property Summit 2020. I think it is going to be a very knowledgeable session for all of you. Because I deal with copyright, so I think it would be appropriate for me to begin with some brief introduction on copyright law, followed by a short presentation. Hope bear with me for during all this time. So, as you all know, that man is gifted with intellect that is used for growth and development of himself and a society at large. The continual process of learning and creating new knowledge with appropriate protection to the creator, along with accessibility of his work to the public, forms of the basis of all contemporary dynamic societies. Globally, there is a growing recognition of the fact that IP is the knowledge or information with a commercial value. It is also being realized that future prosperity of nations will depend more upon their IP and less upon their natural resources and physical assets, such as factories, machines, and office buildings, as the economy of the 21st century will definitely be knowledge-based. 2 decades ago, IPR was put on the center stage of the World Economic Order by WTO. The member states of WTO were mandated to follow prescribed minimum standards in 28 subjects, one of them being IP, intellectual property. Now, are you all aware that intellectual property is traditionally divided into two branches, that is industrial property and copyright. Copyright law is further divided into two categories. That is, copyright law is the strict sense of the word, the protection of intellectual creativity in literary, artistic, and musical works, etc., and law relating to neighboring rights, namely the rights of performing artists, producers of phonograms, and broadcasting organizations. India is a member both of WIPO and WTO, as you know. As a member of its international obligation, India has enacted laws on different heads of intellectual property. The copyright law is administered by the Copyright Act 1957, which has been amended on several occasions, and lastly it was amended in 2012. As a member of Berne Convention and everywhere, copyright, you all know, is not, the registration is not a mandatory process. So, in India also, when copyright comes into existence, as soon as a work is created and no formality is required for acquiring copyright, as somebody was asking me in morning whether copyright registration is compulsory in India or not. So this is the answer to that query. The vesting of copyright in work is thus automatic. The procedure for registration is optional and not mandatory. Registration is only intended to provide prima facie evidence of the particulars entered in the register of copyrights. The register of copyrights maintained in the Copyright Office. Centrally, there is only one Copyright Office in India, unlike other branches of IPR which have branches in different cities. And the copyright vests in original literary, dramatic, and musical artistic works. The idea of originality is to protect works that have originated from the author himself and are not copied from another. Copyright protection is given to original literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works, and not to the ideas. And therefore, it is original skill or labor in execution of the work and not originality of thought which is required. As we are now in the digital era, the activity of internet has raised many issues under the copyright law, as copying and transmission of information via the internet takes place without any degradation, and every copy is perfect. Digitization has caused the cost of copying and distribution to fall to virtually zero. The basic function performed by the internet is to transport digital information from one computer to another. At the functional level, the internet is no more than communication technology. Any type of information which can be translated to digital form can be transported via the internet. Therefore, copyright materials sent over the internet or stored on web servers are treated in the same manner as copyright material in other media. It is important to note that the fact that they are made available on the internet does not constitute a waiver of copyright, nor does it carry any implied license for anyone to download or reproduce the material without the permission of the copyright owner. The most fundamental issue raised in the field of copyright and related rights is the determination of the scope and protection of rights of copyright owners in the digital environment. Some of the specific issues that have arisen are: how should the rights of the authors be defined, and what exceptions and limitations be permitted to such rights? How are the rights of authors to be enforced and administered in the digital environment? Then, can the existing worldwide copyright rules adequately protect the interest of those who hold copyright, or are changes to the existing rules required? It is, however, good practice for all copyright owners to maintain documentary evidence of the date of creation of the work and display a notice regarding ownership of copyright on the material posted on the internet. The documentary evidence will definitely facilitate proof of copyright should there be need to enforce the copyright against a third party. With this brief introduction, I would like to make a short presentation to make the issue more clear. As you see in background, this is our IPR office in Delhi called Bauddhik Sampada Bhavan. Now, earlier the Copyright Office was being administered under MHRD, Ministry of Human Resource Development. In 2016, under our present government preference for IPR law inter alia, the Copyright Office was also merged with other branches of intellectual property rights to bring it under one single umbrella regime. And now the Copyright Office is shifted to this new place. Here the other offices, other branches of IPR are located, like patent, trademarks, integrated circuits, layout designs, etc. So, as I have already introduced I have already said in my inaugural listing that these are the branches of IPR, so I can skip it. Then it is again a brief listing. What do we understand by the copyright? In simple terms, copyright is a form of intellectual property, as you all are aware, protection granted to the creators of original works. Copyright law confers copyright protection on original, literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works, cinematograph films, and sound recordings. There are three pillars the copyright system is based on, which the copyright legislation in the foremost importance. The legislation enacts the law for creative minds, but their rights need to be enforced. Of course, another important factor. And the third is managed properly to harness the full potential for creators, creative, industrial, and economy of the country. The primary role of the legislation is to draft and enact legislation that enables right holders to create and enjoy the fruits of their creative mind. And I'm proud to say that the piece of legislation in India, that Copyright Act 1957, is a wonderful piece of legislation. Then enforcement process, proper and efficient enforcement of legislation is another important pillar. To that, pirates could be kept out of the market, or the effects of piracy remains minimized. In India, of course, the enforcement is state subject, and it is the prime responsibility of the state governments to properly enforce, make proper enforcement. Then management is another important pillar. Effective management of rights is another important factor to keep the market clean of pirates and to facilitate the right holders to offer effective licensing and mechanisms and enhance legal offers. Now, since we are in digital era, digital technology has attained much importance And let me briefly explain the position in international law. International legislation was brought to Internet era in 1996, way back, by adoption of two new international treaties, WIPO Copyright Treaty and WIPO Performance and Phonograms Treaty. These treaties affirm and clarify the exclusive rights that are important in the network environment. Earlier, our Copyright Act was not in harmony with these two treaties, keeping in view in mind the major amendment in 2012 was enacted to keep it in conformity with these two treaties, and only in 2018 India has become member of these two treaties. These are some brief listing of these two treaties. Now I'm come to Indian position. The Indian copyright law is administered, as I said, by the Copyright Act 1957 and Copyright Rules, that is Subordinate Legislation 2013. The comprehensive amendments in 1994 were inter alia of response to technological changes in the means of communication like broadcasting and telecasting, and emergence of new technology like computer software. Then another amendment took place in 1999 that was in conformity with TRIPS agreement. Now, as I said earlier, another major amendment introduced by the Copyright Amendment Act 2012 are significant in terms of facts, as they address the challenges posed by the internet and to provide legal measures to overcome the same. The last amendment, as I said, harmonized the Copyright Act 1957 with WCT and WPPT. With these amendments, the Indian copyright law has become a forward-looking piece of legislation, and the general opinion is that, barring a few aspects, the amended act is capable of facing copyright challenges of digital technologies, including those of internet. The latest amendment has introduced the vital changes to prepare ground for copyright protection in the emerging digital environment, which can be enumerated like a fair dealing exemption used for education purpose, which were earlier applicable only in relation to certain type of works, that are literary, dramatic and musical works, have now been made applicable to all type of such works. A fair dealing exception has been extended to the reporting of current events, also including the reporting of a lecture delivered in public. The transient and incidental storage of a work or performance purely in the technical process of electronic transmission or communication to the public. The transient and incidental storage of a work or performance for the purposes of providing electronic links, access or integration, where the right holder has not expressly prohibited such links, access or integration, shall not constitute infringement. To continue to facilitate digitization of libraries, a new class has been introduced to enable the storage of a digital copy of a work if the library possesses a non-digital version of it. The manufacture of a three-dimensional object from a two-dimensional artistic work, such as technical drawing for the purposes of industrial submission of any purely functional part of the useful device. New section 65A introduced in the enacted act for protection of technological protection measures, that is TPM. 65B has been introduced to provide protection of rights management information, that is RMI in brief, which has been defined under clause, because now we have introduced a definition also to RMI in our act, which was not earlier there. These are features of digital technology impacting copyright law as a whole. Ease of reproduction is now easily available. Once a work is rendered in digital form, it can be reproduced rapidly at little cost and without any loss of quality. Ease of dissemination, the emergence of global digital networks allows the rapid worldwide dissemination of works in digital form. Like broadcasting, digital networks allow dissemination to many individuals from a single point. Ease of storage, that is another factor. Digital storage is dense and it gets denser with each passing year. Ever increasing quantities of material can be stored in a smaller and smaller amount of space. Then again, 2000 amendments reflects the production, material form, communication to public, storing, etc. These are the features of this. I can skip it here. Now, overcoming the challenges is the main issue which we have to concentrate, because threats posed by the digital environment to the copyrighted work are way too different from that in the normal course of physical world. To counter these threats, innumerable techniques have been developed to make digital works difficult to copy, distribute, and access without necessary permission. Two of such techniques, as provided in WPPT and WCT, and also under the Copyright Act 1957, are RMI and TPM, as I said earlier. These are the comparable this thing in international laws, WCT and WPPT. Then coming back on our Act, Section 65A and Section 5B are now introduced. TPM provides that if any person who circumvents an effective technological measures applied for protecting any of the rights conferred in the Act with the intention of infringing such rights shall be punishable with imprisonment, which may extend to 2 years, and shall also be liable to fine. Similarly, on RMI front, if any person who knowingly removes or alters any rights management information without authority or distributes, imports for distribution, broadcast, or communicates to the public without authority copies of any work or performance, knowing that electronic rights management information has been removed or altered without authority, shall be punishable with imprisonment, which may extend to 2 years, and shall also be liable to fine. So these are the deterrents which have been introduced in our law, latest amendment. This is the purpose of TPM and RMI, ultimate sole aim to cut down the high rate of unauthorized accessing and copying of copyright products and digital infringement of copyright, to reduce infringement of copyright by controlling the way in which a work is used. TPM uses different types of technology to control access to digital copyrighted content or to prevent users from copying or sharing it, to provide protection of rights management information. Therefore, any unauthorized and intentional removal or alteration of any rights management information is now made a criminal offense punishable with imprisonment. To permit the copyright owners to gain better control over their works by limiting the categories of access. Now, coming on conclusion, it is evident from the above analysis that while the Indian copyright law is equipped to face a number of new challenges posed by digital technologies, the evolution of copyright has been closely linked to technological development, as technology allows copyrighted materials to be transmitted easily around the globe without the authorization of the copyright owner. There is an increased need for protection without borders. Therefore, it is necessary to balance between easy infringement and expensive enforcement, and to address the uncertainties involved in international litigation. The recent amendments to the copyright law have certainly given room for using creative skills to develop and structure innovative business models to help the industries effectively deal with the changes. The society must be educated on the necessity of copyright protection to prevent any unauthorized use. With this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Friends, as you are aware, today we have 5 sessions. This was the inaugural session. Out of that 5, we have 2 sessions before lunch and then 3 after lunch. So thank you so much, Mr. Jagdish Swarup and Mr. Vijay Trivedi, for your wonderful address. And friends, we break for tea and let us be back here as fast as possible in, say, about 15 minutes so that for the rest of proceedings can continue on time. Once again, thank you so much for attending this.
Friends, good morning, everybody. I welcome you all on behalf of AMA for today's summit on intellectual property rights, tracing its evolution in digital era. This is a very timely subject and very fascinating. It has been a regular, AMA has been conducting for last 5-6 years, regular summits every year. So this is the 6th in the line, I think. 13th. Okay, sorry. Okay. I have the pleasure today to coordinate this session 1 and 2. We have very distinguished speakers from varied backgrounds. And the first session will be addressed by Dr. V.C. Vivekanandan and Dr. B.K. Sahu. It's my pleasure to introduce both of them for your understanding. Dr. V.C. Vivekanandan, he is the Vice Chancellor of Hidayatullah National Law University presently, Raipur. He has 3 decades of teaching and research experience in legal education and served NLS Bangalore and Nalsar Hyderabad between 1990 and 2017. He was also Dean at Rajiv Gandhi School of IP Law at IIT Kharagpur between 2009 and 2010, and was the founding Dean of School of Law at Bennett University at Greater Noida during 2017 to 19. He holds a bachelor's degree and master's degree and a doctorate in law, apart from a master's and MPhil degree in public administration. Professor Vivekanandan was appointed as the MHRD Chair Professor in 2008 and 9, and again from 2010 and 17. During this tenure, he was also representing Government of India negotiating in SCCR meets at Geneva as an official delegate from 2013 to 2015. Professor Vivekanandan specializes in teaching, research, and advocacy of the fields of intellectual property law and internet law. He also has established the Nalsar Proximate Education at Nalsar University and headed the division between 2001 to 2009 and 2010 to 2017, which offers PG diploma programs in patents, cyber law, media law, international humanitarian law. He serves as a jury with CAI in the selection of IP awards since 2015 and also served as a jury with Pharma Excel for IP awards in 2013 to 15. His other non-law interests are music, cinema, and travel. Therefore, I have the pleasure to invite him with a bouquet of flowers. Our second speaker in this session is Dr. Sahu, Vijay Kumar Shahu. He is presently manager, IPR, at NRDC Intellectual Property Facilitation Center, National Research Development Corporation. Vijay Kumar Shahu having Masters of Science from Sambalpur University, Odisha. MPhil degrees were specialized in intellectual property rights and medical biotechnology and health security with a special references to India from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. And a PhD in intellectual property and technological capabilities, a case study of select agro-biotechnology companies in India from JNU, New Delhi. Presently, he is heading of IPFC and United Nations WIPO Technology and Innovation Support Center at Visakhapatnam. National Research Development Corporation, Government of India. He has been working on intellectual property, innovation management, technology transfer, and science and technology for biotechnology innovation. Last 15 years he has been doing this. He has considered as he was one among the 100 influential IP leader from India by World IP Forum for the year 2017. Recently, he was invited as a keynote speaker of United Nations on IP, Innovation in Educational Curriculum. He is associated and advising various departments of Government of India, DRDO, Indian Ordnance Factory, ONGC, IOCL, BEML, NALCO, NTPC, and many others. He has given more than 400 lectures on different issues in IPR and across the country. He also coordinated various innovation and IP capacity building programs and coordinated with more than 350 universities, academia in the country, including member of JNU, IPM Committee, Delhi University, PRSU, BHU, Pondicherry University, PGMER, Punjab University, and many more. He facilitated more than 350 IP patents of various universities, public sector units, engineering colleges in the country, and transferred many laboratory technologies to industry. He is also coordinating a Government of India task force study on innovation policies in China, Korea, and Taiwan, implications for India, and visited many countries. He is also guest faculty of various national institutes like Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration, Indian Institute of Public Administration, Getam University, KIT University, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, and many organizations in the country. With his credentials, we have first session we'll have these two distinguished speakers. And before I proceed, I'll invite Mr. Vijay Kumar Shahu with a bouquet of flowers.
A warm and good morning to all of you. I'm happy to be present today on this 13th annual Intellectual Property Meet. It's a special day also for me, in the sense, 8 years after I was born, I think Senior Trivedi Saab started this firm. And after he started the firm, 6 years later, my brother Jatin Bhai was born. So I'm very happy to be one of the important milestone called 50 years, Golden Jubilee of the law firm Trivedi. In the sense, they are not mere lawyers, they are also legal educators. And this 13th edition, continuously gaining its popularity and reach is a proof of such legal education, what is happening. So it has been a fait accompli, I will call it, that I always block my January 1st week to come to Ahmedabad to be part of this, right? And that's why I'm here. So I'm quite happy, and let me first wish on that in front of this audience. Now, they asked me to speak today. Luckily, they gave a topic which is generally, we call it as a goody-goody topic in intellectual property rights. Because whenever I take patents or copyright, equal force there will be people who have their own, other issues with these intellectual properties. But it looks like GI is comparatively less controversial and comparatively has been, taken by everybody in a happy note. For the simple reason, I often felt that whether it's individual versus community, always the vote is for community. And at times, individuals are, I call it as individual incentivization is more an exception to the rule than the rule. Because any classical economist will tell you, monopoly is bad. Choices are good. But intellectual property rights, as all of you know, as a philosophy and concept, talks about monopoly. Rather, I would call it as a kind of a limited exception to the rule, where without the individual incentive, at times they feel a larger benefit could not accrue to the society, so they do accept incentives. And so the problem always is how much is the incentive, how far the community will be happy. These are often the battleground of every aspect of intellectual property right. But whereas GI seems to be, at least has a semblance of not an individual monopoly, but rather produces monopoly across the board. So that way, I would say that it has been taken with certain amount of happiness in many jurisdictions. So that's the topic what they have given me. And it's a very nascent topic in Indian context, even though it is a very old topic of IP in other spaces. So in such context, I thought I will take about 20 minutes to put my presentation on this to make up for the lost time, so that my other co-panelists will get their full quota of the thick topics which they are going to talk. So let me do this way, I thought, because as I said, in the audience, there is always beginners. And there are always in the audience who are waiting for something advanced. So you need to really balance both of them. So I thought I will first go with the beginner's perspective of what GI is, and then little more move into the advanced perspective of where the subject matter stands. To begin with, as I said, that it is a notice which talks about the origination of a product in a geographical area. So it is a method of IP protection by a register. Every IP protection has to undergo certain formalities. If you know in patents, it is basically what the government decrees through a patent office, and then you have to go through an examination process. In trademark, it's flexible, like you create your trademark, but at the same time, a certain amount of verification is needed that you don't hit somebody else, or you don't hit certain other sentiments of public policy, and then you get your own trademark, and thus gives an option whether to register or not to register. Of course, the advantage is for a registered trademark compared to a non-registered trademark. So it's a kind of a assertion that you have the IP, and then there is a recognition comes from the other side. Similarly, copyright, again, you declare copyright to yourself, and then if somebody has a problem, let them come and prove that that is not a correct copyright till the time your copyright exists. So that's also, in a sense, it is not a government, sanctioned and mooted IP, but rather a self-declared intellectual property. In this context of these three big IPs, quite a large number of other IPs have started flowing in. I would call it as the new kids in the block. So these IPs, if you look at it, has certain amount of origin and tradition. And in such cases, geographical indication, which owes its origin somewhere, different authors say different, in France, in Germany, and other places, where when people started, selling wines, and vineyards had their own different taste. And then when some wine from some vineyards are very popular, and others started, imitating them. As I often tell you, imitation or copying is a second nature of human being, right? We love to copy, frankly. But the problem is whether copying does it, really allows you certain good things. That is where the problem is. Otherwise, there cannot be a greater life than copying, because I often tell, we ourselves are nothing but copy of our parents, right? You and me are copy of our parents. So naturally, it should be part of our DNA to copy things. So, if I would ask this crowd that if there is no examiner in the hall, means invigilator, there is no what you call as cameras fixed when you write an exam, no cameras, no invigilator, and also an oath you take, whatever happens in the hall, you will not come and discuss outside, right? That is a kind of assurance that nobody talks anything, what happens. With these three conditions, if I ask this crowd, touch your heart and tell, how many of you will not copy? Raise your hand. How many of you will not copy with all these things, assurance? Still I will not copy. How many of you? Well, hesitantly, three hands I see. Right? Some people now thought, let us join the politically correct bandwagon. Right? So if I saw three people, my sincere advice to the three people, consult a psychiatrist. It's going to be a tough time for you being in the society. Let me tell you, saw the society around you, right? You three are, right? I would say only consult. I am not going to tell you are anti-national, right? So, what I am trying to tell, I said that it is, I appreciate them in a way that they are more refined and they say that. The others are all conditional. They say that when law is there, penalties are there, why risk? So all of you will, not copy. But if it is not there, what's wrong? A lot of other good things in life to do other than by hearting and reading and coming and writing, right? There are a lot of lovely things around life other than education. So this is the scenario. So that's why I said this piggybacking is one important concept. Right? Taking a shortcut route is a thing. I know many people, why you copy, sir, this one time. Next time I'm a nice person. Right? Everybody has that one time. Right? So this is the scenario which happens. Ma'am, I'm not serious. I just was joking. You have a afterthought. Anyway, what I'm trying to slightly wake you up in this little cold morning. So what I'm trying to tell you is, this piggybacking and, this is one of the reasons. So naturally what happens, this is one of the form of IP. One is incentivization, another one is that to stop free riders. Because free riders, you cannot totally stop free riders. But if free riding is allowed as a legal policy, it is what I say, if copying is allowed as a policy, in examination hall, that's a problem, because nobody will study and come. Whom will you copy from? That's a problem. So somebody has to do something. The society has to keep moving and pipeline should be there. So this is one of the important reason, incentivizing and stopping free riding. So it similarly happens in this particular form of IP, where products are known because of the place. That is a simple factor of GI. Like you visit a place, they tell you, like I'm visiting Ahmedabad. So if I'm going to telephone someone at home, they're going to ask you, did you try any Ahmedabad dish, food? Did you see anything which is very special to Ahmedabad? So similarly, every place has something special about that and nobody wants to miss that. So we buy souvenirs from different places, right? But be careful, most of the souvenirs are in different countries are nowadays made only in China, right? So you try to go for authentic one which is made somewhere. So given all these things, you find GI takes a place. Slowly it came in the wines, and then from the West, as the legal system took roots in different places, and it also has moved towards it. In Indian context, we never bothered. Very funny people we are. In fact, there is more GI in India than anywhere else in the world. Ours, they say every 50 kilometers, when somebody told me every 50 kilometer, your food, culture and taste changes. I told you don't need to go to 50 kilometers. There is a big change between the food my mother makes and my wife makes within the same house, right? So it's a land of variation in many ways. So, but naturally what happens, we had a different policy from independence time. We kept IP into the back burner. We thought development, more production, more development, which legitimately correct at a point of time. They wanted distribution rather than innovation. That was the main idea, because at 1947, average life expectancy of an Indian was 47. Very interestingly. Can you imagine? 47 is the life expectancy average. So the priority at that time was distribution. And it doesn't matter, not the top quality, but some quality and something, everybody should get something, was one of the important priorities post-independence. Whether that should have continued long time is another matter of debate for the historians. But in this context, what happened is, we never bothered about patents, we brought it down. No patents, product patent for food, chemicals, all that stuff. Copyright, somewhere we were more or less okay with the world. And GI and all, nobody knew. Nobody never bothered. But thanks to TRIPS agreement, when it came, they said, see, look, if you want to be part of the club, then you have to do some minimum work. And the minimum work included GI, that you should have an act. So suddenly, from 1995, when we signed the WTO TRIPS agreement, we started quickly in succession enacting many things, and one such thing was GI. But much later they found, okay, this after all is not a big problem. In fact, we have a lot of strength here in terms of GI compared to other things. Suddenly there is a bit of, I would say, frenzy, I would call it at times, of getting GI. We'll see whether that's correct or not at the second part which I say. If I move on to my slides, as I said, why GI? As I said that, see, look, every consumer has his choice, and he wants to pay a premium and buy something, he should be satisfied. But we all know one thing, all of us are not experts. You come home today, and then I give you a cup of tea, and then you taste the tea. I ask you, how is the tea? And of course, when you are a guest, I'm a host, naturally you have to say the tea is good, right? So tea is good. You really liked it? Yes, it's Darjeeling tea. Then you explain, wow, I thought so. You thought so? Yes. But let me tell you, it's only Brook Bond tea I give you, not Darjeeling. Very difficult. Darjeeling tea, unless you regularly have Darjeeling tea, I cannot understand a difference between a Darjeeling tea and some other tea. So the question is, we are not experts, and we buy things thinking we are experts. But if you come to know that you have been cheated, I'm telling you, the intangible problem of emotions, of taken for a ride, is something terrible. So it's basically as in trademark, same jurisprudence, it's linked between the producer and the customer. There is a bonding between both of them, and that trust factor is what finally gives a certain quotient of business. So similarly, like trademark, its same principles apply in GI, only difference in trademark is individual centric or a company centric, whereas GI, we are talking about area centric and producer centric. That's the only big difference what we have. So it's not only to protect the producers, as we said, always the transactional economy we call. Actual economy is this much. For example, an university has been set up, let us say, outside the suburb area. An university will have 1,000 students. And what is the economy of that university? The 1,000 students, each one paying 1 lakh rupee. That's all we think. But there is a transformative economy around it. As soon as university comes, you can be very sure 2-3 dabas will come. 2-3 tea shops will come. However bad the tea, students will love to go there only, right? And they will complain about the canteen tea, right? These are all essential DNA of student life. So around that, auto rickshaws will come, other forms, because you have to go to somewhere. So you find around a big transactional economy revolving. So it's not only the GI part of that, it's also the transactional economy which surrounds that. Having said this, as I said, there is also a subtle difference when you said something comes from a place. For example, Kanchipuram sari is one of the GI. Darjeeling tea is one of the GI. Kanchipuram sari, when I say, it is on the skill set of the weaver, the patterns what they use, and the zari what they use, and the eco-friendly dye what they use, all constitute Kanchipuram sari. A pakka Kanchipuram sari can be done without any problem in Shanghai. And they will do slightly better also. But Darjeeling tea slightly is a problem. At least in today's science. It gets its flavor thanks to the clouds, thanks to the soil conditions, thanks to certain other factors, which is not, I can label Darjeeling tea, but a good taster of Darjeeling can tell whether it is from Darjeeling or not. But Kanchipuram sari is very, very difficult, I am telling you. Anybody can replicate it. In Ahmedabad, you can make Kanchipuram sari and sell it back. It's not a big deal. So you have two divisions there, called Appellation of Origin, which means essentially attributable to the environment. Another one is the specific identification of a geographical region. When you say Scotch, of course, not a right example in a dry state, right? When you talk about Scotch, we are really talking about the spring water in Scotland, which gives you the smoky flavor to the whiskey. Scotch, we call it short form of Scotland. And Champagne, a sparkling wine, what you call the Champagne, an area in France. So this is the difference between appellation and origin. Or in other words, all appellation of origin are GI, but not all GI are appellation of origin. This small distinction which I want to tell if you are a beginner. As I said, appellation of origin, Darjeeling tea, Scotch whiskey, Champagne. And as I already explained to you, very simple, this is a regional origin. Whoever in that region are entitled equally to utilize this mark. Whereas in a trademark, it is very individual. You can buy and sell a trademark. You are not going to buy and sell. Even Kanjipuram, all the people in the municipality decide to make a referendum that we will sell Kanjipuram to Shanghai. It's not possible, right? You don't transfer that. It is fixed to a place. That is a crucial part. And internationally, there's a controversy which will come later. If it is appellation of origin, there is an agreement called Lisbon Agreement, which takes care of the special needs. Whereas in other things, it's done generally on bilateral and multilateral and your own thing. Or in other words, appellation of origin has a special treatment. And as I told you, most of the appellation of origin comes in this wine and similar type of beverages. And this is first mover advantage of the Europeans and the Americans. They try to put in TRIPS in Article 23 that they brought in that this is a special status, which means nobody can come near. Even a sounding name comes, they can be knocked off. Whereas the remaining have to really fight to establish, and that is the biggest controversy which is now raging on, that why should you have two types of treatments for some, which is the advantage to the West of all the wines and different types of alcoholic things compared to many other GI which is emanating from the developing world. So just to give you, right, because it's a very monotonous long definition, I thought I'll give a colorful picture, right? This is a Kanchipuram sari, right? And very interesting. It is reputation, characteristics, all these things put together, very interesting. They talk about locality, territory, these are all very intermixed words. It can be agricultural goods, it can be natural goods or a manufactured goods. All this put together, the GI, this is an act in India, 1999. And if I move, as I said, for locational advantage, since patent office is 4, trademark office is 5, GI still is a small nascent thing. They kept Chennai as the convenient administrative head office, but it's a roving committee which can go to any part of India and register GI, but they have, and all of you know, for example, design, Kolkata is the head office for design, but it doesn't matter, administratively it's the head office. So the difference, as I said, an association or an organization which takes care. It is not individual who like trademark. This is an association or an organization who gets it from the GI office, and in return this organization or association distributes with among the producers in that region after certain level of verification. So it's a 2-tier system. Unlike trademark, which is a direct system, this is a 2-tier system. And once the application is accepted, like every other IP, it is advertised in a journal. Is there any kind of opposition? Because when I say territory, it is not the government municipality territory. It is a territory which you ascertain where all this particular product originates from. So it may cut across 2 municipalities also. So if there are some issues left out, there is a chance now to come back and then rectify that, and that is why opposition serves as a kind of a balancing act. And if the mark is opposed or dismissed, the mark will proceed to registration, and it is valid for 10 years and can be renewed like trademark. Time to time you can renew. It's not a very expensive thing. It's very little money what the office charges. That is for the administrative thing. Now, the most important feature is the registered user. As I said, if a cooperative society registers for Darjeeling or a Coorg, or every plantation owner in Assam or Kodagu can become registered user, authorizing to use the name, including the origin, product and distinctiveness. In Europe, the GIs are very famous, and as one of the statistics shows that in Germany alone, you got about 300 types of wines. That might be a news to many of us, because all of us know one thing: wine is red in color and wine is white in color, right? That is the distinction which many of us understand, but it looks like 300 wines, little smell and little sip, they can tell you, so many things are existing. So you can now understand the importance of GI in certain places, what they do. And there are several internationally well-reputed indication, what you call as Kanchipuram, monsoon coffee from Malabar, Darjeeling. In Tamil Nadu, there is a place called Tirunelveli, and anybody goes to Tirunelveli, they will ask you, did you buy halwa and come? Because it's so famous that it's useless if you go to Tirunelveli and come empty-handed without getting the Tirunelveli halwa, which is a very normal household stuff, halwa, but it has built a reputation for itself called the Tirunelveli halwa. So you have this type of things all over India. And how do they do this? It's a very interesting factor. It is part scientific and part experiential, I call it. It is not something, a textbook method of examining. In fact, if you know there is a GI, the people there, the who work, they try to tell you what are the parameters. So the parameters are all taken from them, and then it is codified, and that becomes a standard. So, for example, as I said, the weave and waft means, how the shuttle moves. Weave and waft of the sari is one important ingredient to understand differentiation, the type of zari used, the type of dye what is used. And as I said, for the very keen enthusiasts of Kanchipuram sari, it only comes in 6, 8 and 9 yards. Why I am telling this? When you go back home, if you have a Kanchipuram sari, measure it. If you are having 6.5, 8.5, you have been taken for a ride. Many of us don't know. Many people who wear Kanchipuram sari doesn't know this, right? And why? There is no question. In culture and tradition, you should not get into scientific analysis. 6, 8, 9, long time they have been doing. Maybe for different age group and different height they might have been doing, or different girth of the body they must be doing. Then that is beyond anything. It is the tradition. So you should not get into scientific analysis of tradition at a point. You have to do what the tradition tells. That is what is the difficulty of bringing traditional things into a modern scientific thing like IPR. But anyway, at this present, this is what I want to tell. The standards are fixed by the textile experts in consultation with the weavers. The standards should be published and easily accessible, and after the standard. Now, the biggest problem is it ISO? No. ISO standards are different. It's more a scientific platform. This is not ISO, but within the prevailing, tradition, what is the standard? So quite often the big problem is, even today there are 300 GI registered. Many of the GI will have GI, but are the standards have been adhered to? That is where the problem. But we have to wait, because the Act comes in 99, the rules comes in 2003, 2004. Hardly a small run-up is happening. And within that, whether we have maneuvered, now the problems are coming that there are labels, but they don't adhere to certain level of standard. So one doesn't know whether something is, in spite of the label, something is duplicate or something is originally evolved from somewhere. These are all some of the issues which I will lead in the last 2 slides. So normally for filing a GI application, a statement of the case, which class it belongs, a map, as I told you, not the municipal map, the map where these manufacturers are present, particulars of producers, affidavit, a standard benchmark elaborating the uniqueness, how quality and integrity is maintained, any special human skill, geographical environment and inspection structure. This is the essential ingredients when you move towards a GI. As I told you, just a sampling: rice, basmati, Nellore, Dehradun, wheat, Punjab, fruits, Alfonso, Dasari, Ratnagiri, Bihar, lychees, Nagpur oranges. So the list is endless. Including milk of Anand is considered as a reputation now, right? Milk from Anand, Gujarat is taken fait accompli as a good product. So that's the kind of reputation it became, even though it's a very modern. So tradition, how long is not a question. So sometimes tradition is much, much less, but it has now become part of the understanding. So natural goods, coal of Newcastle, lignite of Neyvelier, gold of Kolar, and petroleum, Arabian petroleum, considered as the sweetest petroleum. Please don't taste it. It's sweetest petroleum, that's what they say. So manufactured goods, sari, I think their list is endless. Men don't have much equity there, right? Sari, endless, slipper, lock, matchworks, and then bed sheets and sandalwood and fenny, is Goan fenny, right? So you really, this place is full of GI, right? So foodstuffs, I'll come to the controversy later, whether rasgulla belongs to Bengal or not, right? Bengal rasgulla, Bikaner bhujia, Andhra pickles, Varna. So the important concepts are registered proprietor, who is the producer, who is the authorized user, collective reference, who can apply, rights conferred, and GI becoming generic. As you all are aware as students of trademark, right, when you don't protect much, a trademark becomes generic, right? Even in a law school, I keep correcting my colleagues, don't say, I will bring a Xerox, tell me I'll bring a photocopy. Every time I will tell, right? I am tired, but the people around me are not at all tired. They again tell, sir, we'll get a Xerox. They will tell. I'll tell, get a photocopy. I'll tell. Because at least law schools should know this difference, if not others, anywhere else. So, Xerox has become, photocopying equivalent. Many of you may not know that refrigerator is actually a cooling box. It is a brand name which became, generic. Refrigerator they call it, right? Similarly, there is a possibility of GI become generic. For example, Chinese food. Isn't it so generic? Or isn't it a GI? Chinese food. Everywhere. Is there any street, any type of restaurant not serving Chinese food? Whether it's original Chinese food or not, that's a different story altogether. Because I brought some Chinese friends in Hyderabad, I told them to taste. They were utterly shocked. They said that, you call this as Chinese, They said, so the Chinese food everywhere. Now, how do I capture back Chinese? A similar question is arose by my own place, Hyderabad biryani, right? Hyderabad biryani is so ubiquitous everywhere, including Netherlands. I see in shops Hyderabad biryani. Now I'm going to can it back to Hyderabad is a difficult proposition. So sometimes the problem of how we are going to tackle certain things which has become generic like trademark is a question. And this is for anyone enthusiast filing an application, a preliminary scrutiny, constitution of consultative groups, examination, showcase notice, publication in a GI journal, opposition, registration. These are the standard format for you to do. Now, little bit of issues I will take for the advanced. For some of you, who are already exposed, some IP professors are there. I see one of my colleagues, she has written a nice piece on GI. I have seen some of them. Right? For what is the advanced one? Let me tell you some of the advanced part is, right, I'll skip some of this and go to conventions. As I said, the Paris Convention, the Madrid Agreement, Lisbon Agreement, TRIPS. These are the international, I call it as intervention points to establish GI. If I look at TRIPS Agreement Article 22, right, it talks about, protection of geographical indications, right, based on 22. Some geographical names may have common usage, has been accepted now devoid of geographical significance and have made mere trade description. For example, Roman candles, plaster of Paris, Portland cement, India rubber, Chinese lanterns, Amritsar shawls, French polish, Turkish towels, eau de cologne. So all of them have now lost, in a sense, their GI tag and rather, as I said, became generic. And Article 22 deals with GI at a general level. Article 23 offers an additional level of protection. Additional level means the member states has to protect against incorrect usage of the relevant GI even without the requirement of deception and confusion. Whereas Article 22, they have to protect against misleading and incorrect usage. There's a big difference. The 23 gives an exceptional protection, which is reserved for wines and certain other alcoholic, drinks. Whereas the remaining all fall under 22. So the biggest fight which developing countries were talking is why there should be a distinction like that. Either you make everything under 22 or you make everything under 23. Whereas a person having these type of classes under 23 can easily stop without much of a legal issue. Whereas in 22, if I have to stop, I have to spend a lot of money and I have to really fight a case and do that. So one of the anger is that even in TRIPS, even though you say it's a level playing field in a sense, but there is no much level playing field in that, and this is one of the long-standing demand. That's why I said, for example, the Indian Gruyere cheese is actionable only on proving that Gruyere as a cheese is well known. First I have to prove it's well known in India. I need some statistics, some survey to do this. And then the said expression would be misleading compared to geographical aggregation. Or other side, if I use the word Indian champagne, merely the usage is incorrect. Doesn't matter I said the word Indian. Doesn't matter. Anybody knows what's a champagne, and then when I say Indian, you know it's a local. And people are ready to buy at a cheaper rate. They very well know it's not a French import. But still, I can't even use the word Indian champagne. It can be stopped. This is how to distinguish between Article 22 and 23. So what is unfair about Article 23? The same provision dealing with one type of product, there are two levels of protection. Benefits of only wine producing countries, most of them are developed countries. Most developing countries do not have wines as a major revenue earning product. Mostly their products are handicrafts, rice, tea, coffee, spices, etc. Their economies are heavily dependent on these products. Given the disparities, these products might find it difficult to compete in international markets. So this is one thing. For example, when Kenya, which is a tea producing country, started selling in international market Darjeeling tea. So when we protested, they said we are renaming a mountain range in Kenya as Darjeeling. So it will be called as Kenyan Darjeeling tea. But still, Kenyan Darjeeling tea and Darjeeling tea, it's a lot of passing off can happen. So it is really, really difficult to protect in these things, whereas it's a much royal, easy route if you are under Article 23. So this is some of the things which, out of want of time, I'm going to skip some slides and go towards the curious case of the divine GI. Can you recognize what is this? Tirupati Laddu. That's why I said it's case of a divine geographical indication. Just to brief few minutes, I'll take with the permission of the chair so that others can come in. This part is the story is the Tirupati Tirumala Devasthanam, which is basically a private trust. Of course, with a heavy government intervention is there because the members are all appointed by the current government of Andhra Pradesh. Earlier it was United Andhra Pradesh. And they have their own, the Hindu Endowment Board and other things. They approached a law firm stating that they want to make Tirupati Laddu a GI. The reason was in Chennai, which is very close to Tirupati, many go via Chennai. A lot of hotels were selling Tirupati Laddu, which did not originate from Tirupati, but similar looking laddus, taste-wise they could master, not a very big ingredient or anything, they were selling. So they wanted the devotees or people who can't afford to go to Tirupati but still buying these laddus from the shops and the hotels. So they want to stop it. So they went and approached. So accordingly, they moved an application of GI. When they moved the application, of course, that a group of members have to visit the particular place to ascertain whether it's a GI, all that. And I'm sure that a lot of people will be clamoring to be members to visit Tirupati because, first of all, they'll get a very close darshan also, right? And can spend more time. So they quickly moved into inspection and opposition is there, they advertised all that. One scientist from Kerala, he filed a case in the Supreme Court stating few grounds. One is that he said, first of all, this Tirupati Laddu is a prasad, means a divine offering given to somebody. It is not a commercial product to come into this. Second, he said, the principle of GI is the community of producers. He said, where is the community of producers? It is done by the trust, which is an entity. It's a corporate entity, like it's a trust entity. So where is the question of community of producers doing? Third is said, where is the geography? It is the kitchen of Tirupati Devasthanam. And the kitchen can be shifted anywhere they like, right? It's a normal kitchen where they make this. Kitchen means a place where they make these laddus. On these grounds, he objected. So they sent a notice to that, and for some reason, little later, he did not appear for some of the proceedings, and later on the court decided that it can be given. The appellate authority decided it can be given. Even they fined him some money, I think, some 10,000 rupees they fined him. So this was one of the things which, in my personal opinion, this is one of the problem of, I consider the future of GI in the country is, it's not the question of scoring goals, but rather what GI really does. The GI in the West really consolidates business and makes the money. Sometimes we are into some race where it is not exactly, because the amount of laddu sold in Chennai substituting Tirupati is not much. And anybody knows, going to Tirupati and getting the prasad and giving it to you, anybody comes and offers you the laddu to you, the first thing they say is that I went to Tirupati. I am offering you. And people used to take. And it is not a delicacy, delicious to eat much. It is to take a little, They don't give you one laddu. They take you in a plate, little you take. Like a prasad, what they call. And they take it and put it in the ear and then eat it. So, I don't know where this whole issue, and it's my personal view, that they should have been more cautious about, about giving this. But anyway, today, let me tell you, IP is so powerful, it even protects God's prasad, right? That may be the bottom line. Now, second one I'll say and then close is the bittersweet. This is suddenly, this Rasgulla business came up as a GI. And when the Rasgulla was moved by, some people to be made as GI, and the origin was, people said it is a household name in West Bengal in the mid 1800s, around 1850s. This Rasgulla was made by a family called Kesi Das, I understand. From there they said this belongs to Bengal, and after that the appellate board said it belonged to Bengal. And I don't know, and suddenly somebody went and told Mamata Banerjee, we are one. And she thought it's a TMC victory, right? So, and not to be, cowed down, you had the Orissa chief minister who gave a war cry. He said, no, Rasgulla belongs to us, because it was during Puri Jagannath's 12th century, you see the hymns written about Puri Jagannath. There is a mention about the Rasgulla in many of the stanzas. So it is an old traditional preparation which much backdates than Kesi Das. So finally, our GI board was quite smart. They gave them also a GI. Now that is called the Odisha Rasgulla. One is called the Bengal Rasgulla, and they brought in compromise. So one of the worrisome thing is that this country has enough river water problem, right, sharing between states and other things. It should not enter into a GI fight, because I also know one unresolved case was Bidri work. There is something in Karnataka called Bidri. It's a black metal, engraving in a district called Bidar district. And basically people say it even came from Iran. But, they were doing that, and many of the people shifted to Hyderabad area, and they started selling, and they issued a notice, because Karnataka government has taken the Bidri GI, and they issued notice to people in Hyderabad museums, the handicrafts, that you should not sell by the name called Bidri. You can sell it by any other name. So that was a big controversy. Then they found all the artisans have migrated, many of them to another place. So these type of controversies do come. But I hope it will be intelligently resolved in one sense. But as I said, it is one of the latest entrant in Indian IP, scenario. But it has taken a lot of zeal, and a lot of people are doing that. But the moot point, as I said, GI for the sake of GI, or GI for the sake of wealth and finance, that is the big question. Every IP is quite a waste if you keep the certificate unless you monetize it. So here the monetization, there is no much movement. how to monetize, what is the support to be given. Many of the small handicraft people may get a GI easily, but what happens later? If there is an infringement, they need to spend money. Government is not going to spend money on that. So in such case, it is very essential, probably government to think over to certain level of protection, certain level of procedural things. Otherwise what happens? Record sake we have so many GI. But on the ground reality, what GI has to perform and what it has to do seems to be very different from what is happening in the West. So that should be one of the serious area which people have to explore if GI to be really meaningful and useful. With this, I would like to stop at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vivekanandan, for giving us a good insight into the GI, which is a basic, I think, entry point for intellectual property rights. I would request Dr. Sahu to make his presentation.
Good morning, all of you. A very happy and prosperous New Year. It is a great honor for me to come from a medium humid zone to yesterday at chilling zone at Delhi to coldest zone at Ahmedabad. And thank you, YG Trivedi sir. Our best wishes to your organization for the Golden Jubilee, what you are celebrating today. God bless you and your organization also. And speaking after Professor Vivekanandan is something challenging for me because I learned from him and this is the second time I am sharing the stage at Ahmedabad. And I am having cold, please forgive me, but the topic what I will be speaking before will be is the challenging. And as far as I look after the management of intellectual property and commercialization of intellectual property. But as far as the management of intellectual property is concerned, today when we talked about innovation and intellectual property, we all of knows that we are much more behind in terms of the quantitative index in the global innovation index. And when we compare with our own neighbor on intellectual property and innovation also, we are much more behind. That is one of the challenge to mitigate the risk of innovation management in national innovation system. And in fact, the Prime Minister of India in recent Science Congress talked about, his motto is innovate, patent, produce and prosper. And that is the greatest challenge for a country, the Mother India, what we are the part of the citizen of this country. Our innovation index in the global and also our intellectual property as compared to global intellectual property protection in the country is much more behind. Out of 45,000 patent applications filed in the last year, only less than 20,000 patent applications are resident patent applications, and most of them are multinational corporations are filing the patent. So that is our quantitative index of innovation to protect. Today, in fact, Professor Vivekanandan has talked about the WTO, TRIPS agreement, compliance, protection system. If we will not protect, we will perish. We have seen in the case of Haldi, Neem and Basmati. So in the WTO regime, we must have to protect, then we can prosper. And intellectual property doesn't mean that, in the context of patent, it doesn't mean that you will get a monopoly right. It is a significant contribution of an institution in the national innovation system that this university or this institution is created some innovation, and that is the creativity we must respect, and that is nothing but the indicator created by our own scientific community for the national benefit. More than 10,000 engineering colleges in the country, more than 800 university and deemed university in the country. Not a single university and engineering college in global standard as per the report. So that is the challenge today we are facing, and when we are talking about intellectual property right, when we visit many of the universities, they do not have a proper ecosystem for managing their intellectual property. They have a beautiful student or the faculty with PDF and lot of global experience, but they do not have institutional mechanism. That is the bottleneck today to create when we are talking about United Nations Sustainable Development Goal for affordable innovation, adaptable innovation, and available innovation. But we don't have the ecosystem to manage our own risk at our own place. So navigating new business to the world, the future is foggy when we have been talking about Startup India, Digital India, and Innovate India. Let me tell you my own example when I'm sitting at Visakhapatnam, the largest one of the incubation hub with in a so-called startup village. Many of the startup came, many of the young people, they have a good idea, but let me tell you from these 4 photographs, these are some of the startup people, those who are incubating their product. They are every day, one startup is having a problem in intellectual property. What kind of intellectual property? Let me tell you. I will start with one of the young chap, Ali Asgar. He came from Germany. He has a product called RoboBoat. The beauty of the RoboBoat is if somebody is drowning in water current, automatics this product go and rescue the person. This is the simple innovation. He has, we file his patent. We protect his design as a safety and as a trademark as a safety and also design. He has incubating the product. He got Defense Innovation Challenge Award. He got around 1.9 crore from Ministry of Defense. And he is in the GEM list so that he can sell the product in the market and the people will get benefit. I mean, Eastern Naval Command is ready to take the product. But in recent time, he got an infringement suit. That some company has filed an infringement suit against him that you are using my idea in your product. This is one. Another is GCRC, one of the young chap from IIT Kanpur. He has developed a geoclimatic condition to see the forecasting the risk assessment. Like in a small way, in a he has developed the mechanism that suppose some Naxalite in that particular forest, the BSF is going there, BSF can easily get that these are the area, red zone, so they should not be to enter to that person and take the precautionary measure. He got GAL 2 crore defense funding, funding, startup funding. Another young lady from Odisha called Ruchi Masala. This is one of the industry in Odisha who has given around 1,500 people are depending livelihood on that Ruchi Masala. In the name of Ruchi Masala, many people are selling the Ruchi Masala in the market. Another one photograph, recently we transfer one technology from one of the lab to the industry and patent filed by one of the lady scientists to the one of the young, another lady industry who left the job and has a startup. So all these people are challenging or managing their IP every day. How? I am not going to brief detail because I have 20 minutes, but certainly I will tell you, when there was a cockfight between MiG-26 and F-61, we have been talking about technology. And that is MiG-26 is not our technology, that is a Russian made. And F-16 is certainly a US made technology. So mitigating our own risk, and that too in Ministry of Defense or the country depends on the import on strategic technology is more than 70%. Nobody, even recently I visited my CV, Dr. Rao told that I have been advising ordnance factory. Let me tell you about ordnance factory today. Many of the countries where we have a bilateral cooperation to supply the raw materials, they are reluctant to provide that raw material. So now we have to mitigate our own risk and challenge at our own place, nobody will give us. Let me also tell you in a common way, when I transferred from Delhi to Visakhapatnam, because I was acquainted with roti, but since I could not travel with my daughter and wife, I was there for 2 months. I was trying to get a roti in Visakhapatnam. You will not get a roti, that kind of roti what we got in Delhi. So that means how I mitigate the challenge, because I was not comfortable in rice, although I am a Odia rice eater. But thing is that we have to prepare or we have to manage our own risk at our own place and indigenous. And that is the challenge we have been facing, and that is nothing but the challenge of intellectual property generation, management, and commercialization. So IPR is really an emerging challenge when we talked about IoT, blockchain, now cryptocurrency, and also artificial intelligence is coming. Many of the professors have a lot of biological flora and fauna they are using for a lot of drug development. Certainly there is a issue of that NBA, National Biological Authority, you have to get a permission for using that plant material for filing a patent. Special 301 provision, you might be knowing what is Special 301 provision. That means India has been kept by US Department of Commerce as a priority watch list who violate intellectual property. And our 60% R&D is coming from public sector organization, government organization, and out of that, that is mission mode, like ISRO, BARC, certainly other organization, and then it goes to Department of Science and Technology, Department of Scientific Industrial Research, CSIR, Department of Biotechnology, that is the societal mandate R&D funding, and only less than 17% coming from private sector industry. Why? The reason is intellectual property management. Regulatory compliance, you know, let me tell you one of my own example, which we filed one of the patent. I think last time also I told this example. 1025 Del 2001, one of the application from one of the university. And that patent we filed. Unfortunately, that patent was granted in 2016. We filed in 2001, granted in 2016. And we transferred that technology, fortunately, because it was a publicly funded R&D to that university. So we got a client, and we transferred to one of the startup in Delhi. We got 2 crore rupees from that lump sum premium as a transfer of technology money, and also 10% of the royalty every year. So after that, let me tell you, the scientist who developed, he passed away. Patent we got late. Although there is a mechanism of delivering patent and grant of patent has been increased certainly, but let me tell you, if you will not give a patent in a particular period of time, although once we file a patent, we get the priority, we can do the commercialization or anything what we can do. But we must have to respect the time period. And unfortunately also we lost that great scientist who developed that technology. So these are the biggest challenges in our day-to-day life as far as intellectual property management is concerned, and also signing of any bilateral cooperation with any organization. Small example I'll give you, some of the professor and university people are here. One of the professor of Pondicherry University got a fund from MOEF, and since the university do not have an intellectual property policy at that time, he filed the patent without intimating to the granting agency. And he also filed the patent not in the name of Pondicherry University, he filed in his name. So the point is that we don't have an IP policy. The IP policy should be there in an institution, those who are doing R&D, and IP policy should be a Bible of that university. Everybody should respect that, from registrar, university, student, and faculty. And in recent time, you might be knowing many of the vice chancellors caught in plagiarism. They lost their job. So plagiarism is one of the biggest challenges for the university in the country today. And another point, those scientists who got the fund from Department of Biotechnology or DRDO extramural research, DBT has a one of the clause, the patent will be owned by Department of Biotechnology, Government of India and university, not any individual. Or individual, yes, he will be the inventor. Many people do not respect that. That is the biggest challenge, the awareness. That is the biggest challenge today. And other issue, consultancy. Today, when we are talking about R&D consultancy, because in China, let me tell you, we visited one lab, one university in China. The beauty of that university is the young professor has an excellent room, good quality of facility of lab, but one of the renowned oldest professor, senior most professor is sitting in common room. That means their orientations have the academia industry collaboration. because we have a lot of research, R&D funding research, consultancy research. That kind of mechanism we don't have, and we have the policy in the country, but that mechanism, academia industry collaboration is very, very poor in this country as far as intellectual property is concerned. How much time left, sir? Odisha Rasagola, certainly, because I came from Odisha. And let me tell you, as a Odia, the Odisha Rasagola during Ratha Jatra, you know, there is a story behind that. Already Professor Vivekananda talked about. But certainly, GI is nothing but the livelihood security to the communities who are depending in the cultivation of that product in that society, Araku Valley. The impact of Araku Valley coffee is, let me tell you, you might be knowing many people comes to Araku Valley as a destination of the tourist, but those people who are getting livelihood by registration of geographical indication of goods. Tirupati Laddi certainly. So when we talked about out of box, we have seen in the movie called Three Idiot, Chatur Ramalingam came all the way to get the patent from Phunchung Wangdu. The movie itself gives a story how innovative we should be, but unfortunately that kind of ecosystem we have not created in our engineering college or university. Although Atal ranking for institutional innovation index has recently set up by the AICTE, then also Atal Innovation Mission came, NIRF framework came, but seriousness about intellectual property management is not there in the country. Frankly, I am talking about, because I visited many of the university, I think more than 500 university. We signed the MOU to create a IP cell and IPR policy. That kind of momentum is not there still now. Although we have a national IPR policy, UGC has asked university to set up a IP credit course and also IPR cell. This kind of mechanism already government of India has established, but as a leader, we have not established in our own institution to leverage inculcate the innovation in our own places. This is a beautiful story of Mission Mangal, the movie, how affordable innovation you can give to the Mother India. And in that movie, you might be knowing there is a recycling of plastic issue is there. That technology, let me tell you, we patented it and we transferred to 10 different companies in 10 different states in the country. When the Prime Minister of India and everybody talked about the plastic waste as one of the challenges, today this technology, I myself transferred to 10 different companies, including in Delhi, Kolkata, and also Visakhapatnam, Hyderabad, and some of the other industry are ready to take that technology also. The inventor who developed from an institution is also getting recognition, getting financial credibility after the retirement, and at the same time, that is a affordable indigenous innovation created by our own people, our own communities. And that is nothing but the innovation index in the country. These are the 4 photographs I thought I should. All these technology are developed by the 4 students of different engineering colleges. Patent has been filed, and the beauty of the invention, I need not, because I have a less time, but this is one of the, what we can say, this drone. The beauty of this drone is target the plant appropriately, the plant which are having the disease of different type of disease, and target that plant and give the pesticide. So these are the different type of technology they have developed, and we must have to protect and leverage and also commercialize for the benefit of the society, so that we can make the country the vision of the Mahatma Gandhi sustainable indigenous innovation, and also fulfill the SDG, Sustainable Development Goal. What we do, I do technology commercialization, and recently we have a women scientist program, IPR scientist, and in fact the Honorable Finance Minister has in recent time talked about Nari to Narayani, how we can build the capacity of a woman in terms of to be a techno entrepreneurship, forget about entrepreneurship. We give them a training on intellectual property, and they will be the women scientist of Government of India, and they will look after the intellectual property of various corporate institutions, and we train them for 1 year, then they can go and work in any of the organization wherever they got the opportunity. And also we try to develop as I told, Nari to Narayani. The beauty of this program, how we develop some of the GI product to this lady in Baleswar of Odisha, and they themselves self-sustainable today. So intellectual property is nothing but bringing Lakshmi and Saraswati together. And how, this is one of the technology we transfer from NDRI, National Dairy Research Institute, Karnal. Those scientists who have developed in 2010, we filed the patent, and also we commercialized this lab scale technology to one of the company called Quality Dairy. And today, the scientists are already retired, and those who were the PhD scholar in got the job because of this kind of credibility, and the product is marketed in the name of Live Light, and we the people are getting benefit out of it. This is called innovation, what we have been talking about, social innovation for the society, so that our own people can access, aware, and adapt. So these are the model. Now MHRD has come out the institutional innovation policy, or the council. The IP should be one of the integral parameter to manage the intellectual property of that institution. But the mindset today is, nowadays research is like that. We are not solving our own problem at our own place. We are only going towards the publication. That is the missing link as far as the academia in terms of intellectual property is concerned. In fact, there are other issues I need not to discuss. We have a lot of gamut of speaker who will be speaking. Sir is there, Anubhav sir, Padman Bush sir, who is an excellent pharma expert, but paradigm shift through innovation is there. We must have to respect, and this is my mother India when we talked about innovation in Asia, China, China, Japan, Korea, and where India is. So what we do, I'll just like to show you some of the photograph. We try to connect academia industry. We try to connect both Lakshmi and Saraswati together. How? We go to each university, we create IP cell free of cost, we file the patent free of cost, trademark free of cost, all IP we file free of cost. And if any startup comes, we help the startup also, beside IP facilitation, we help in seed funding also. And also any good idea, we give National Innovation Awards. Last year we had organized Innovate India at Ahmedabad. And we give many awards to the budding innovator, student, faculty, and also National Societal Innovation Award, and also awards related to technological innovation. Some of the technology we transfer in recent time, the Prime Minister of India in recent time talked about the this underwater remotely operating vehicle. First time in India we transferred to L&T and Bell, and let me tell you, this lab scale technology we transfer from NIOT to this company, and this company has hired many more engineers to develop this product for the country. Recycling of plastic waste technology, that is the plastic waste, it will be a tile, and this is a small, the patent, the inventor photograph is also there. We transfer to as many as 7 companies, and the product is in the market, and many of the GVMC, I mean municipality has been using that tile as a floor making. This is one of the startup who got 1.9 Defense Challenge Award for bringing SAFC to rescue the person while drowning. So these are, and also this is one of the products. Suppose many of the, you might be knowing, in Baroda the unfortunate incident happened, we lost 7 students. So the person has developed a automatic fire extinguisher. If there is any fire, it will be automatically burst and douse the fire. And the product, the young chap has hired as many as 100 women who are working in his company, and the product in the market, and we protect as a patent, trademark, and then design. This is called intellectual property management, commercialization, and sustainable business opportunities to the society. These are some of the technology we transfer to very young entrepreneur in the society. This is our office at Visakhapatnam. Also recently we protect the patent, design, and also trademark of Dhanush gun, and Dhanush gun was inducted in Indian Army. So small is beautiful, and we are trying to do in a small way. So thank you for you to giving me opportunity. God bless you all. Jai Hind. Yeah. My mobile number and email ID is last. I must show you because if you need any kind of IP support, if you are a startup, or also you want to set up an IPR cell, in your university, or because we establish innovation facilitation center in many of the university these days. We give small component of grant also. And for IP support we have been giving, and also capacity building program on intellectual property in each university, engineering college, and PSU. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sahu, for giving us very good insights into innovations, intellectual innovations and related IPR issues. Our next session, we have two distinguished speakers from abroad. I'll give a brief introduction about them. Dr. Lisa McLem. She is the lecturer, School of Management, King's University of Economics and Maths, Canada. Lisa is a scholarship fellow at the Center for International Governance Innovation for 2015 and 2016 session. Her Canadian JD is with specialization in intellectual property and information technology, and her American LLM is with a specialization in entertainment and media law. She is on the editorial board of Journal of Fandom Studies, and previously was a student, editor, and then a member of the alumni editorial board for the Journal of International Media and Entertainment Law. Her dissertation is on the regulation of digital content on the internet with a focus on the entertainment industry. Among the issues that she studied are international law, trade, and UN regulatory frameworks, telecommunications regulations, technology law, human rights implications, and intellectual property law, particularly copyright. With this, I would welcome Dr. Lisa McLem with a bouquet of flowers. Our next speaker would be Mr. Gregory Merrill. Mr. Gregory Merrill is a partner in the Portland office of Carlquist Sparkman LLP. His practice has focused on the preparation and prosecution of computer-related and bioinformatics patent applications and business methods and intellectual property counseling. Mr. Merrill's experience includes a wide range of software development, user interface, bioinformatics, and telecommunications technologies, including complex algorithms and numerous programming languages such as Assembly C++, LISP, Java, and various visual and object-oriented languages. 5 years professional computer science experience with particular emphasis on system integration and software development, and senior systems analyst from 1991 to 1993. His other professional activities are, he is a volunteer, ESL member, American Intellectual Property Law Association member, and American Radio Relay League. Therefore, Mr. Gregory is a very fit, distinguished speaker today in the digital era. With this, I would welcome him with a bouquet of flowers. Dr. Lisa, ma'am.
This is gonna be a little snug. Is there any way to?
Ajay bhai,
That's okay. This'll work.
you
This'll
know
work.
how to present that?
No, this is fine. That's just for notes. No, it's okay. It's fine.
Okay.
We're all good.
Okay, fine.
Should that be opening? We're running a little short on time, right?
20 minutes.
Sure, I will blast through it then. Okay, I would first of all like to thank YJ Trividi and AMA for inviting me to participate in the 13th Annual Intellectual Property Summit. I'm thrilled to be here, especially for the Golden Jubilee as well. I'm going to just really quickly go through a few things that are happening in Canada. I think there are a lot of synergies between Canada and India when it comes to intellectual property and particularly with copyright. So I'm probably not going to talk about all of these things today because we're a little short on time now, but we'll take a brief run through some of them. So I wanted to take a quick look at how copyright is a little bit unique in Canada. And then talk about recent developments, particularly from a digital standpoint. I'm going to talk a little bit about our recent election, the new mandates that have come down in regards to intellectual property. I'm going to talk very briefly about artificial intelligence and copyright, and I want to talk about some recent cases, particularly dealing with notice and notice, as well as some that deal with users' rights. And we might get to talk about global and streaming services or the new NAFTA and IP, and we might also look briefly at our new trademark regulations, which came into effect in July of this year. If I don't get to those are included in the little publication that came out today. So if we don't get to trademark, you can catch it there, and you can always talk to me about it. I'm happy to talk about it at any time. All right, so some of the things about the Canadian Copyright Act are that set us a little bit apart are the duration, which is life of the author plus 50. That's obviously TRIPS compliant. That's one of the things that is unfortunately about to change for us, and that's from the influence of the new NAFTA trade agreement with the US. So we're going to be pushed to that TRIPS plus standard of life of the author plus 70 years now, and I hope to talk a little bit about why we're not super happy about that. One of the other things that sets Canada apart is that we are one of the countries that has moral rights. So that's the author's or performer's right to the integrity of a work, or the performer's performance is infringed only if the work or the performance is to the prejudice of its author's or performer's honor or reputation, distorted, mutilated, or otherwise modified, used in association with a product, service, cause, or institution, etc. And I'm bringing this up in particular because one of the cases I want to talk about today actually does bring up moral rights. We've only actually ever had one case that went up to the Supreme Court in Canada, but it is something that we also have that's a little bit unique. We have fair dealing, and it's been put forward as a user's rights. And the importance of user's rights is another thing that really sets Canada apart. Section 29 of the Copyright Act deals with fair dealing, and it sets out the limited factors or the limited areas for fair dealing. So for the purpose of research, private study, education, parody or satire, those areas do not infringe copyright. So it is a restrictive grouping. We're currently undergoing a copyright review, which I'm going to talk a little bit about when we get there. And one of the things that we'd really like to see is to actually emulate the United States and add in that little such as, so it's not as restrictive. But we do have some really interesting elements within our fair dealing exception as well. First of all, unlike the US fair use, our factor test isn't actually set out in the legislation. It comes down to us through common law, through the CCH case, and it presents 6 non-exhaustive factors that are also very similar to the fair use for factor test in the US, but a little bit different. The CCH case, I'm not going to go into that in depth, but it is one of our foundational cases that really underscores from our Supreme Court the importance of users' rights and balancing those rights. It's a really kind of a cool case because it does come down on the side of fair dealing, and it actually deals with photocopy that was done at the law library for lawyers. And it was still seen as being research and being squarely within the fair use or fair dealing exception. So the 6 factors include the purpose of the dealing, right? So the focus is then on considering the fairness of the goal for which the permitted activity took place. For example, if it's research or education, and the absence of safeguards with respect to compliance tends towards unfairness. So then we go on to the character of the dealing. Courts have to examine how the work was dealt with, the number of copies made, and the extent of the dissemination. Also, the character and amount inquiries must not be conflated. So specifically, the character factor involves a quantification of the total number of pages copied. It's a quantitative assessment based on aggregate use. So it's not just a matter of number, but substance as well, right? And so then we go on to the amount of the dealing. This requires an assessment of both the quantitative amount of the dealing and the qualitative importance, where guidelines are devised to advise as to the quantity of work that can be fairly copied. The court has to consider the specific thresholds, the rationale for those thresholds, the amount of any one type of the work, and it's incumbent on the user institution to explain the basis for the delineated amounts and types, and to explain why they are in and of themselves in combination with other features fair. So again, it's non-exhaustive, and the factors are balanced against each other depending on the various facts of the case. Then the court will also look at the alternatives to the dealing, whether there's the availability of a license, but the availability of a license isn't necessarily a relevant alternative, right? So even if there is a license available, that doesn't necessarily put it out of the realm of fair dealing. They also look at the nature of the work and the effect of the dealing on the work itself. So that's our 6-factor test that the courts will look at. And we'll just go through that very quickly. And then we get into other aspects of fair dealing. So fair dealing for the purpose of criticism or review does not infringe copyright. And of course, that speaks into the public policy aspect as well of copyright. Fair dealing for the purpose of news reporting, the same thing, right? We need to have an educated populace if we're going to have a relevant democracy. And just moving on. Possibly the best thing that we have in Canada is our non-commercial user-generated content exception, our YouTube exception. It's not perfect, but it's a good step in the right direction. So you are able to use an existing work or other subject matter in the creation of a new work. You then own the copyright in that new work. Now, it has to be for a non-commercial purpose, and you have to give attribution to the source. You also have to make sure that the existing work that you are creating from is a non-infringing work, but so far so good. There have been some inquiries about, well, let's say you have something that you put up on YouTube and you put it up and it's a non-commercial use, but then suddenly you start to get lots of hits and suddenly you are making money out of it. Does it suddenly become infringing? The good news is no, it doesn't. YouTube is able to then funnel royalties to the original work, and that generally takes care of the issue. We haven't had any cases come forward at all as far as the user-generated content exception comes. The one aspect of this particular exception that isn't so great is the 4th factor. So it does not have a substantial adverse effect, financial or otherwise, on the exploitation or potential exploitation of the existing work. So if you come up with something that's absolutely out of the box that the other person hasn't actually thought of, unlike other times when you might be doing a fair use or fair dealing assessment, they can still say, well, gee, that's a really great idea. We want to do that now. So that's one little loophole within that particular exception that isn't so great. But those are some of the things that set us apart. Educational institutions in Canada have large exceptions, and I'm going to just mention those. This is a great little slide that sort of gives you and it comes from Brock University. It gives you a great little sense of, is it infringing? Is it not infringing? You know, can I use this in my course? Can I upload this? If I'm putting this up on our educational page, as long as it's a link, as long as we attribute it, as long as there's a license involved, there's different things that will let educators know that they're still in the fair dealing realm for their students. Libraries, archives, and museums have lots of exceptions for us as well. And then we have our notice and notice system versus the notice and takedown in the States. And this is another thing that really sort of sets Canada apart. It firmly underscores the user's rights theme that runs throughout our copyright. So in the US, notice and takedown, the owner asserts that there's infringement and they notify the ISP. The ISP then has to take down the content and notify the owner. So the DMC safe harbor ensures that the ISP is not liable for secondary infringement, but and then the content owner can then petition to have the material reinstated, but it's at a considerable cost to them. Okay, so I decide that you're infringing me, I send the ISP a notice, they take it down, they let you know that they've taken it down and you're infringing, and then if you want to get it back up because it's not infringing, money comes out of your pocket. In our system, the owner can assert that something is infringing, so they notify the ISP. All the ISP then has to do is notify the person who uploaded. That person can then decide whether or not they want to take it down or not. If then the owner decides that they still want to pursue it, then they have to basically start legal proceedings. So money comes out of their pocket. So they have to put their money where their mouth is in order to prove that it's infringing. Okay, so the user isn't the one that's immediately having money taken out of their pocket. So it's a much more user-friendly and innovative-friendly system. And yes, we've had lots of cases come up recently about it. But it's working well because the courts are standing behind it. So some of the things that are happening in Canada right now, it's a hotbed. So we have our Copyright Act review that's happening. We also have the Broadcasting Act review and the Telecommunications Act review that are coming down. We've had a recent election in which our majority government has gone to a minority government. Unfortunately, that's really sort of seemed to affect us in that there's been less of a focus put on digital innovation and so on. It seems like that's maybe taking a bit of a back burner to some of the other issues that are going on. But we still have a very firm commitment to net neutrality. Access in the streaming industry, in the digital environment is, of course, paramount. We have a commitment to funding for cultural works within the country, to film, television, music, and publishing. Those are still in the mandates that just went out to ministers. And we have a commitment to getting 5G across the country. Canada is, as you are probably aware, kind of big, but it's also very sparsely populated because doesn't have a nice climate like you have here. So it's hard to get people to want to live in the north or work in the north. So it's very expensive to get that 5G network everywhere, but it's so important for people who are at far-flung areas of the country to have that access. So that's an ongoing issue for the country as well. Turning to the review itself, the copyright review started in December of 2017. The House of Commons designated its Standing Committee on Industry, Science, and Technology to conduct it. They took the roadshow across the country. They talked to people at various different stages, including myself. I went to Toronto and presented in front of them when the opportunity presented itself. And so did this gentleman. How many people here know the singer Bryan Adams? Yes, excellent. Okay, I don't always get such a great response. So Bryan Adams actually took it upon himself to go to Ottawa and present in front of the committee. His concern had to do with reversion rights for authors. So authors actually have reversion rights 25 years after they die. Okay, their rights go back to their families, which is great, assuming the families even know that that's happening, because they don't always, okay? Often what will happen is if the company that actually owns the copyright in the musical works is still out there and making money off of them, they're sending a royalty check and the family's just happy to get the royalty check, okay? If they're not exploiting the work, there aren't any royalty checks, and most heirs don't even realize this is happening. More to the point, the artists themselves gets no benefit from this. Bryan Adams does not need to make any more money, okay? He's hugely successful internationally, but he took it upon himself to go to Ottawa, and what he asked the committee to do was to consider making those reversion rights happen 25 years after assignment. So it would actually happen within the artist's own lifetime. So if whoever they sold their rights to was not exploiting the rights, the author themselves then could exploit the rights themselves. If they were being exploited, the author could then actually get a bump, right? They could maybe resell those rights or renegotiate a better deal. So that was one of the things that happened during the review that was pretty cool. So that was one of the issues that came up. There was a lot of people wanted to keep our duration at life plus 50, but unfortunately, with the new NAFTA, that's not really going to happen. And the review has come out. They haven't actually gone forward with actually changing any of the Copyright Act, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other suggestions that came up with that. So some of the copyright review suggestions, they wanted greater clarity on ownership rights for computer-generated work. So there we are back in the digital environment. Give the courts more tools to help rights holders protect their intellectual property from being pirated. Give paramount importance to net neutrality. Again, so important in the digital environment. If you've been to the States recently, you may have noticed that your videos have started buffering again in places. That's because they don't have net neutrality anymore. Give leeway to individuals who illegally download movies, music, or other property, and target distributors, right? So take it away from users, put it on the distributors. The fight against piracy should focus more on large-scale commercial infringers. That's the same thing. They wanted more consultation with provinces, territories, and indigenous groups about how to implement a countrywide artist resale right, which would entitle artists to receive a portion of secondary sales, which is a little bit more important in the digital environment. Other suggestions were to update the rules of first ownership that apply to video works to be more current in light of the digital age again. Consider studying a number of issues in the journalism sector, including the remuneration of journalists, publishers' revenues, copyright infringement, online platforms. The newspaper industry is dying. People don't buy actual print newspapers anymore in Canada, right? It's all online. So we need to find different ways to do that. One of the other suggestions was to cease having reviews every 5 years, because that's just too soon. We were supposed to have the 5-year review from 2012, so it should have been done in 2017. It's now 2020 and they're not done yet. So obviously that's not working. And they also suggested a full-scale simplification of the Act. And that's a really good thought as well. So with the recent election, we had mandate letters that went out to all of the ministers. I just wanted to highlight a couple. The ones that went to the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry. Those are the ones who did the copyright review. There's a lot of interest in reducing the cost of cellular phone bills. If you come to Canada, we have the Wi-Fi we have is not bad, but it's like super expensive, super expensive. So there was things in there about reducing cell phone bills, awarding spectrum access, delivering high-speed internet to 100% of the population by 2030, and working with the Minister of Canadian Heritage to modernize the Broadcasting Act and Telecommunications Act. We have two different acts. It doesn't make sense in the modern world to have broadcasting and telecommunications separated. So really, that needs to be looked at, and that should be coming out, I believe, around January 31st of this month. We're supposed to start to see some finalization there. The Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry was asked to work with the Minister of Canadian Heritage to introduce legislation by the end of 2020 that will take appropriate measures to ensure that all content providers, including internet giants, offer meaningful levels of Canadian content in their catalogs, contribute to the creation of Canadian content in both official languages, and promote this content and make it easily accessible on their platforms. They suggested more work in the digital charter, new regulations for large digital companies to protect personal data, ethical use of data and digital tools like AI, work with the Minister of Canadian Heritage to review the Copyright Act. Minister of Canadian Heritage, Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, they both got one line that said, you know, get on with the review of the Copyright Act, and that was it. So I was a little disappointed in that. As far as the first point goes, working with content providers to offer meaningful levels of Canadian content in their catalogs. Most broadcasters are required to remit a certain amount of money into the Canadian Media Fund, and they are also required to have a certain amount of Canadian content. This doesn't apply to Netflix, okay? And this is a big problem from the other broadcasters. As far as actually promoting Canadian culture, it's maybe not such a big problem. Netflix committed to contributing $500 million over 5 years to Canadian culture and media and so on. They've already fulfilled that mandate. Okay, they didn't even need 5 years to do that. So they're actually going above and beyond what they're doing. So again, my theory here is that we need to really be looking more innovatively at these streaming services and how they can really help to foreground our culture. How am I doing for time? Am I getting close? Yes. Okay. I'm just going to blast through the Minister of Canadian Heritage, again, asked to look at the Broadcasting Act, Telecommunications Act, create new regulations for social media platforms, strengthen the regional mandate for the CBC, increase annual funding for the Telefilm Canada, and look at the digital charter, again, work with the Minister of Innovation and reviewing the Copyright Act, and work with cultural and creative sectors, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so moving right along. Looking at AI and copyright, these are there's two main issues really when we look at AI and copyright. And the first one is who owns works created by AI. So that's one of the things that people are looking at. The other one is the need for data sets for machine learning, right? So for AI to take place, there has to be some input, right? It's not that much different from a person. So making machines smart, whether it's engaging in automated translation, big data analytics, or new search capabilities, it's dependent upon the data being fed into the system. So machines learn by scanning, reading, listening, or viewing human-created works. The better the inputs, the better the output, and the reduced likelihood that results are going to be biased or inaccurate. So copyright law crops up because restrictive rules may limit the data sets that can be used for machine learning purposes, resulting in fewer pictures to scan, videos to watch, or text to analyze. So given the absence of a clear rule to permit machine learning in Canadian copyright law, it's often called a text and data mining exception. Our legal framework trails behind other countries that have reduced risks associated with data sets in AI activities. So it's been suggested that that would be another place to have an exception within the Copyright Act. So recognizing a limited information analysis fair dealing exception would then echo and support research to grow Canada's IP culture. So an express exception to ensure copying a lawfully accessed work for the purpose of informative analysis is really not infringing. And certainly other countries outside of Canada, such as Japan, the US, and China, have extended and are extending legal protections for broad machine learning techniques, including text and data mining. All right. So, turning to some recent cases. So Rogers Communications versus Voltage goes back to 2018. And this underscored that there were two purposes for the notice and notice system that I already mentioned. So first of all, it's to deter online copyright infringement. Okay, there's no way around that. They are trying still to control that copyright infringement. But it's a matter of balancing the rights of interested parties, so owners, users, ISPs, and intermediaries. One of the things to really be thinking about when you look at Canada that sets us apart, and not a good way, and I believe we already had somebody discussing the fact that monopolies are always bad, is that ISPs in Canada are generally lumped in with our telecommunications companies, and this is also a reflection of the huge vertical integration we've seen in the US. We have an oligarchy, really, okay? So we have Rogers, Bell, TELUS, and really we just have the three. It's really an oligarchy. They basically run the show, and they are also ISPs who also have content. So we might see that ISPs would want to protect their users, but in the case of companies like Bell and Rogers, they're protecting their content, not their users. So this provides a bit of an issue as well in Canada. So the ISP owner is not required, again, to provide a person's identity without a Norwich order, which they have to pay for, okay? So there's a distinction of obligations between notice and notice and the Norwich order. So what happened in this particular instance is Voltage said that there were a bunch of infringers, and then Rogers said, well, okay, we'll notify them, okay? And in order to notify them, they have to, get a certain amount of information. So when they came back and they wanted to, they didn't take it down, and they wanted them to take it down, and they wanted more information so that Rogers could contact the people directly, which is the next step. Rogers said, well, yeah, you have to get a Norwich order, and then you're going to have to pay us for the extra work that we have to do. So off they went, and the court said that, yes, in fact, there was more work that had to be done in between simply notifying the ISP, the user, and actually notifying them. So it wasn't a lot of money, but it was a little bit of money that they had to actually pay to Rogers in order to get that information. So again, it's another step to sort of make, companies like Voltage take a step back and say, okay, is this really worth it? We're not going to be trolling. We're not just going to be going after everybody. There has to be a real problem here. ME2 Productions versus Doe. When Parliament adopted the notice and notice regime, it sought to balance the interests of copyright owners, individual subscribers, and internet intermediaries such as ISPs. Achieving the balance requires copyright owners to act with diligence in preparing their materials and meeting the normal standards of evidence. So in this case, what happened was the Norwich orders weren't actually up to the court standards. So in this case, TechSavvy really pushed back, and they were able to get them to drop the infringement against, or they didn't get them to drop, but they were not able to go forward with a number of the different accusations because the Norwich orders were seen not to be done properly. So again, it was the court saying, if you're going to go after infringers, you're going to have all your ducks in a row. You're going to have to be willing to put your money where your mouth is, basically. And I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to skip over the Bell Media case. Oh, okay. Can I just talk about one more case? Just one more case. Okay. I'm just going to talk about, well, two more cases. One is just a sentence. I only wanted to bring up the Young and Thacker case for one reason. Because it's a really good illustration of why we need copyright education. It was basically a young musician. She had written a song. She wanted to get a video made of it. And it ended up triggering copyright moral rights in a musical composition. So she hires this guy to do a video. He doesn't do a great job. She tries to get the raw footage of the video. He says, you didn't pay for that. They didn't enter into, they had no contract between them, okay? It really just illustrates why we need educational programs on copyright to help users through this. In the end, the court did decide that, and in fact, the guy who created the video never actually showed up to court. He ended up posting the video on a site, and when he was asked to take it down, he didn't take it down. He didn't respond to cease and desist letters. He didn't show up to court. So she was able to get an injunction against him eventually because clearly he really didn't respect the law in addition to not knowing it. She also tried for moral rights because he posted a video that she hadn't approved of, but in that case, they did not prevail. They did win on a case of copyright infringement, but not moral rights. She was entitled to some damages. She wanted to claim, and again, this is another confusion with the streaming in the digital world. She wanted to claim basically 82 counts of infringement because the video was viewed 82 times, but of course she could only get 2 cases of infringement, one for the sound recording and one for the performance. And so she ended up with $2,000 in damages. She wanted punitive damages. Again, the judge said that was not appropriate either. And then she wanted $25,000 in fees, for which she had no evidence whatsoever. But the judge did end up giving her $2,500. Basically, the judge said, this is just a case of people not understanding the law. The Keatley surveying, I will just briefly mention, it was a Crown copyright decision in which basically the Supreme Court said, we can't rule against this, but we don't need Crown copyright anymore, and really the government should be looking at this during the review. But they also really underscored in this particular case users' rights. There's a lot of dialogue within the case itself about users' rights. So if you are interested in Crown copyright, users' rights, I would highly recommend those, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, Mr. Gregory Merrill.
All right. Well, where are we on time? Good afternoon. We have about 15 minutes. I guess I'll maybe go a little over. But I would like to thank, I would like to thank the organizers, of course, for putting this together. My name is Greg Maurer, and I come to these every year, and wow, how it's grown. And we have to thank the organizers and the people who put this together, because it doesn't happen by itself. There's a lot of planning that goes into this, and so I would like to thank everybody who has played any part in making this happen, including you for coming. So it's an amazing thing that we have here. We bring people from all over the world and from all different disciplines and from different backgrounds. And Professor Vijay was telling me, you need to have your own voice. And I think, for example, Canada as a country has its own voice, right, in the IP sphere, right? And can we all do that? Can all of our countries do that? Can India have its own voice? Yes. And so that's part of what we'll talk about today. Now, the way the organizers, what I do is I get down here and I walk around. I hope that's okay for the camera people. So I was asked, what happens is I get an email, and the email says, okay, Mr. Gregory, this is what we'd like you to present on. And I have no idea what it's going to be. It's going to be some topic. Typically, I have to do a lot of research on and figure out. This year, we have a blockbuster topic, I think. And I actually have a background in artificial intelligence, so it was a lot easier for me to do this. I actually started working on artificial intelligence in the 1980s, if you can believe it, going back that far. The problem back then was there wasn't any data. There wasn't a lot of data, as was rightly said earlier. It's having these big sets of data that is really going to drive artificial intelligence. We have that now, right? Artificial intelligence is taking off. It is skyrocketing, and we'll see that in some of the presentation materials here. Now, I license the presentation under Creative Commons. What that means is you can make copies of it. In fact, I encourage you to make copies. Why? We're trying to get the information out there, right? That's the whole purpose of this conference. We're trying to get the information. I was very amused when I started my research on this. The first article I came to, I clicked on it and said, please pay. I said, oh no, they want me to pay for the article. Totally they're right, copyright, they can do that if they'd like. But what the spirit of what we're doing today is not that. We're trying to get the knowledge out there. And as a matter of fact, you may be looking at me and expecting me to give you answers. Sorry, I'm probably not going to give you too many answers today. I'm probably just going to give you more questions, because that's just the way AI is. And things are really taking off. And we really don't know where it's going to end up. But I'm going to ask you to bear with me as we go through this topic of artificial intelligence and patent infringements. It can be a little difficult, at first, but once we start rolling, I think you'll fall into it and you'll see that it's a very important topic and it's interesting. So first, I'm handed a topic like this and I have to sort of start at the beginning, and that was as was rightly said, you have the basics and then you have the advanced, and I have to sort of cover all of it, right? So one of the things is, what is an AI? I mean, we have to start with that. Some people here probably, what exactly is an AI? So I'll talk about that. What is patent infringement? We have to talk about that. I have to skip all the way through patent law in about 2 minutes, but we'll do it. We'll do it, and we'll see if we can get there. And then what I really want to talk about is the special infringement considerations in an AI context. And then, as always, we have a case study so we can see how this stuff actually works for real. Now, I hope I'm taking this presentation in the direction that the organizers wanted, because there are other things we could have done. We could have talked about, can an AI infringe? And somebody was already talking about that. What happens if an AI infringes? And then sort of the secondary question of that is, who pays if the AI infringes? Who's liable, right? And then we also have, can an AI police? Could an AI check to see if there's infringement? Now we have a police department. Think about the implications of something like that. We're not going to talk about that, but think about that. Can an AI decide legal issues, right? Someday you go before an AI judge. You were speeding. Here, photograph, I show you you're speeding. Come back, tell the AI, no, my speedometer was broken. The AI says, well, that's not an excuse. I mean, is that really something that could happen? Could you have a judge that's an AI? Do we want to live in a world like that? So anyway, but those are different topics. I'm not covering those today. So my theme today is, does India want to encourage patents to cover AI? Because India is going to find its own voice. And of course, I am totally unqualified to speak on any legal matters in India, but I'm going to tell you what I have seen from the United States. Different legal system, but hopefully there's some commonality, right? We come together, and this is the human experience. We come together to learn. We come together to progress. This is how we do it. We're here in person. We're going to progress today. So let's go ahead and get started. First, what is an AI? Well, sometimes we call it machine learning, or a machine that appears to think. It's actually just very complicated mathematics, right? How many people know what a neural network is? And how many people have actually done a neural network in an Excel spreadsheet? You can do it, right? You can put together a neural network in an Excel spreadsheet and train it, and it will give you answers. It's just mathematics, but it's so complicated mathematics at this point. It has gotten to the point where it does not appear to be just mathematics anymore. It appears to be intelligence, artificial intelligence, right? So I'm just going to skip over that. We're going to go straight into it. Now, how do I create an AI? You have to have the source data. You can't create the AI unless you have the training data. And as I was saying earlier, artificial intelligence is not new. It goes way, way back. In fact, I even did a patent case on artificial intelligence in 2001. And the reason was we had data. We started getting data at that point, big data. You need big data to do AIs. 5, 10 data points, no. 10,000 data points, yes. Now I can start doing AI. You might not like the answers that you get, but I can do the AI. You train the model with that data. So you pick out things. And let's take an example. I don't know, does anybody have an example that they want me to talk about? Let's talk about hiring people, okay? So that was the case that I dealt with. It was hiring people. The reason we had the data is we knew how long people were working. How did we know that? We looked at the bank records. Okay, I paid you for these 5 years, then I stopped paying you. I must have fired you, or you must have quit because you stopped working. So now I know how long you've been working. That's the data. You have to have the data. Without the data, you can't train the model. Then we ask people as they come in. We ask them questions. And then we correlate the data. And we have good data on this person lasted 4 months, this person lasted 15 years. And companies say, I want to hire the person who lasts 15 years. So you can train the model to predict. New person comes in, fill out questionnaire, ask the AI, how long is this person going to last? It's mathematics, it's science, and it can be validated. This person is going to last 5 years. Good, I'll hire them. This person, 4 years. Okay, this person, 2 months. No, I don't want to hire that person. This is what's happening, right? The AIs are making the decisions because we're all too busy to do it ourselves. So we put it over to the AI. The AI makes the decision. So think about that, right? And so this is where we're at. Turns out, one of the essential questions on the questionnaire was, what is your favorite color? This, in combination with all the other things, for whatever reason that we don't even necessarily know, It's a predictor on how long you will stay with the company. A human being would have never come up with that. What they do is they put in these experimental questions, and then they find out which ones work, and they keep those. And the ones that don't work, they take out. This is how AI works. We don't even understand. You ask the computer why, the computer says, I don't know why, I just know this person is going to last 5 years. Okay, and that's an area to think about. So, and that kind of goes into what we'll talk about today. Then you have to validate the model, right? It's science. You can't just go off and say this does it. You have to actually prove that the model works. You do that over a period of a year, 2, 3, 5, 6 years. Then you have a really strong model. And then you use that model to make a prediction. So here's another example. Say facial recognition. I think we all can understand this one, right? You take images of faces, and you have the name of the person, or the identity of the person. Could be a number, right? We can go to that type of a society. And you train the model using those faces. And you validate the model. And then you give them, here's a face. Who is this? Computer will give you an answer. You can use that at the airport. You can use that in the police station. You could use that in people's houses. You could use that at your front door. You could use it anywhere, right? And it's generally accurate. Oh, of course, the thing is, when I came up, they said computers don't make mistakes. Totally wrong, right? Computers make mistakes all the time, right? We all know because we ask Siri a question and it gives us the wrong answer, right? So that's the thing. So there are false positives. But it's very accurate, it's very convenient, and what's scary about it is we can just say, let the AI make the decision. I don't want to do it. Let the AI do it. That's the scary part, right? But this is how it works. So we're just talking about, we're not getting into those issues yet. What we are getting into, and I did the research on this. I actually found this, and thanks to Hoffman Warnick, there they are. But that I really need to do the research. We all know this is what's happening, right? We all know that the AI patents are coming. So I talked about AI, and we know AI is now picking up. And we know we have the big data. We have the Googles, the Facebooks, all the others have giant piles of data. And now we look at the patents entering into the same spheres. Now we have patents overlapping with AI. The discussion is there. This is one of the first really interesting things that I found, patenting artificial intelligence 2018. I talked about that last year when I was talking to people. There's a whole lot more out there than just this. I'm just showing that this is like an official EPO thing. They sort of got into it pretty early, but there's other stuff that's out there on it. But first of all, I have to start with what is patent infringement. I think people here kind of know it, so hopefully I can go through this again in 2 minutes. But this is patent infringement. A patent is a government monopoly granted for a limited time, 17, 20 years, whatever it is. And then after expiration, the technology goes into the public domain, right? So the idea is there's a patent, limited term, and it goes in, and this is supposed to encourage innovation. And if an infringer, well, that's sort of a conclusory statement. If someone makes, uses, or sells the patented technology, it is a legal infringement of the patent rights. Okay, that's it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but essentially this is what a patent is. Look at the make, use, or sell, or import, or export. There can be other things. But make, use, or sell. It's interesting to look at that. So what? So that's a patent. Do I care? I'm just going to go home. Well, actually, it really does matter because there are legal remedies of damages, injunction, and seizure. In the United States, if you have a patent and you have enough evidence and you go before a judge and you convince the judge, they will, and they'll do this in something similar in India, I'm sure, they will get the federal marshal who will go down to the warehouse, cut the lock off, open up the warehouse, and seize the goods. Okay, the police will go get them. Okay, so that's that. There is real, actual teeth. This is law, and you can engage the machinery of the government to go in and take the goods. Think about that person who's the goods. What if they weren't really infringing? Well, you have to post a bond or something, maybe in case it was incorrect. So that's essentially it. That gives the teeth to the patent law. Without this, there really is no patent law because you can't really take any remedies. So, having said that, let's look at the special considerations for patents in the artificial intelligence sphere. First, these are just some things that I think we're going to see are special when we look at artificial intelligence that are different from other things, like selling a shoe or something like that. First, you have policeability, which is also called detectability. You have validity. You have the remedies, and then you have these ethical considerations. And there are going to be some ethical considerations with AI. And we don't like to talk about them sometimes as lawyers because they don't have really solid answers. They just lead to more questions. And there are exceptions, and we like nice, clean rules. But the thing is, we have to be careful about the legislations that we draft for AI and how we enforce AI patents because of the ethical considerations. So I'll look at some of them, and I'm by no means an expert on this. I'm just sort of did some amount of research and brainstorming and found these 4 things. So let's jump in. First of all, there's policeability. So I said that patent infringement is when a party makes, uses, or sells the patented technology. How do I know if someone makes, uses, or sells the patented technology in an AI context? What if it's in the cloud? How do I know what's in the cloud? How do I check my patent against what's in the cloud? How do I know if Siri is infringing? How would I ever possibly know? It's in the cloud. So to some extent, maybe the patents won't be so important because all these things are going to be hidden away, right? And you won't be able to actually tell if someone's infringing. And even if you somehow were able to see Siri and look at how it would you still know, even if you had it, you had the code, and all the mathematical weights to all the inputs to the neural networks, would you even know if it infringed even if you had it? You might not be able to tell, right? It's sort of you'd have to get experts to look at it. It might be difficult. How would you even know? So it's a huge problem if you're a patent holder in AI, it's very difficult to know if an infringement has occurred. The improvement may be in the way the model was trained. The model itself might look like any other model, but it was trained a special way. How do we know how it was trained? How do you know? What do? You ask them? Are they going to answer your questions? Maybe you forget how it was trained. How is it even documented? How would you know? So I'm coming up with questions. I don't have answers for all of these, but I'm thinking that there's going to be pressure on these things. And for example, if you were a legal services company, you might come up with some way to try to prove this. Or if you're an expert in the field, you might try to figure out a way that you can document the way something operates in the AI field. We want to dig into that black box and open it up and see how it works. Okay? And then we have, in the US, we have these so-called requests for production. Everybody knows what that is, right? That's discovery. So in the United States, you file a lawsuit and you can ask all these questions, and the company has to open up all their books to you and show you what they've been doing. So you would have, once you get into court, you'd have an opportunity to file these requests for productions, which says something like, please provide all the documents having to do with the Siri project between the years, 2007 and 2008. And then Apple would have to go out and get all those documents and provide them. That causes all kinds of problems too, because what if there's a trade secret in there? Should they have to produce all that? Should they have to tell you? So you see there's all this. This is the policeability and detectability problems that we look at. But if you had the full access to the model, maybe you could run some tests on it, right? You could try some cases. Here's one thing. There's these Easter eggs that you can put in. Let's see if I can get this to work. This is, I'm going to use Siri. Siri, will you marry me?
My end-user licensing agreement does not cover marriage.
My end-user licensing agreement does not cover marriage. That's what she said. So that is sort of what's called an Easter egg, right? Because only Siri is going to say that, because that's a joke, right? And this is something that's been done over the years in copyright. There have been these seeds that are placed in business guides and things like that. So if you make up a fake person, then you put it in the book, and then you know, hey, somebody copied that, because that person doesn't exist. You must have copied it from my book. You do the same thing here. But what's the problem with that? That's copyright, right? If it doesn't say that, does that mean that it doesn't infringe? No, because patents cover independent development. So it's a different issue. Now, I'm not saying not to do this. This might be some way to help police. But you really are going to need to test this model. Somebody needs to figure out how to do that. How you test the model to see if it infringes. Anyway, and then another, I really like the presentation on copyright. I mean, it's so much to learn in intellectual property, right? We have the GIs, we have the copyright, and now I'm talking about patent, there's trade secret. I mean, the world is full of it. There's so much to learn. Could copyright pollute an AI? Let's say I have a model and someone gives me copyrighted data and I train the AI. Anyway, that's a different issue. Let's get into something else. Validity is another issue. So we talked about detectability. Now let's move into validity, okay? Validity is a separate issue from infringement. Everyone tells me it's a separate issue. Well, okay, but the common way to attack a patent is through invalidity. So if you want to talk about infringement, you're probably going to learn, well, what's validity? Well, you say that this patent is not valid because it's not new. Someone else already did this, right? So that's the way you can attack. And then you have damages and injunction for infringement. These also open up all kinds of issues. How do you figure out the damages? If Siri is infringing my patent, how much money do I get? Do I get all the profits from Siri? Do I get a reasonable royalty? Do I get some sort of, I don't know, some economist? Do I have an economist say, oh, well, Siri used this feature 150,000 times during these months, and the overall user base of Apple is this, and so we can attribute the hardware cost of the iPhone with 5%. I mean, it'd be some long mathematical formula, right? I don't know how you would figure that out. An injunction. Can I say, stop Siri, take Siri down? My patent covers Siri, turn off Siri. Well, that would be a pretty powerful thing to have, wouldn't it? Because Apple would say, well, okay, we'll pay you some money to go away. So it makes a big difference on these things, right? So, and then we get into ethical considerations. What if an AI provides for the safety or welfare of people? And we'll look at that, how that interacts with patent infringement. Are there evil AI, right? Google's model, what was their motto? Do no evil, right? Isn't that what they said? So, isn't that ironic? I mean, Google has all the data now. They can make the AIs. Are they going to be evil? Are they going to hire people based on their religion? Are they going to show you certain types of content based on where you live because you're wealthy or you're poor? Who knows, right? And what if that infringes? Could there be a virtual unclean hands? Or we have an equity doctrine in law. Could the AI be, a bad actor? and the court goes after the bad actor. Yeah. And more questions. So let's do the case study and then we're done. Okay? So the case study is Oil Well and Company develops an AI with new data that directs where the oil well should be drilled. This turns out to be really interesting, right? And they get a patent on the AI. This is great because in addition to having a 90% success rate, the AI avoids drilling where oil would leak into groundwater. That's the big thing about Oil Well and Company. They go in, they say, we can show you where to drill. If you drill a well here, you certainly will hit oil and big oil. You're going to get lots of oil if you drill here. And there will be no leaks in the groundwater because we figured out a way to look at, now what's the AI get as inputs? The AI gets the geological aspects of the elevation. They do core samples. They look at, the history, the composition of the land. They look at the weather. They look at all these different things. They look at the contours of the land. Take three-dimensional. They use LiDAR on it. Okay, they do everything, right? And then they figure out, okay, you should drill here, and there won't be any leakage. And everybody loves this, and they're making lots of money off of this, right? Because they're not only are they getting the oil, but there's no contamination into the groundwater. So this is fantastic. This is really taking off. But of course, what happens in the business world, as always, the copying, right? We have other companies suddenly starts taking business from Oil Well and Company. Oil Well and Company sues them for patent infringement. How do they know? How do they even know that they're using their technology? On what basis can they even file the lawsuit? We think they're copying. Okay, well, you could also say, I think he stole my shoes. I mean, how do you have to have some evidence, right? There has to be some evidence before you can walk into a court of law. Otherwise, you get sanctioned by the court. The court will say, hey, don't waste our time or the public's time. You need to give me some evidence. So you would have to do some sort of testing. I guess you would have to get a hold of the model, or you'd have to do something with that model. How would you even do that if it were in the cloud? Maybe you can get a customer to leak it to you. Maybe you can spy on them. Is that ethical? Can you do that as a lawyer? You probably shouldn't be spying. So, I mean, how does that suit even get filed? That's a question, okay? I don't have an answer. Another thing is that then after the suit is filed, it discovered that actually other company developed their own AI. They didn't rip it off. We made our own AI. That's not a rip-off of yours. But that doesn't matter under the patent laws, right? Under the patent laws, independent development is still an infringement as long as the patent covers it. So how do I determine that? Do I compare these AIs? How do I do that? Right? And then under validity, can the information used during infringement analysis also be used for validity? So doing this infringement analysis, I learned everything about how this thing works. I might also find prior art. I might also find out things that I can use to invalidate the patent. All right, so I go on sort of this discovery process in the United States. You get all this data, and then you also assert invalidity. You have invalidity contentions. And then the remedies. If there is infringement, what are the damages? All right, how do I apportion that? Oh, well, we got more customers because of this, so we lost customers over here, and so this is some economic formula that's done. And then say that the oil well prevails. Yes, it's patent infringement. Okay, can I cut out that part of the AI somehow? So if Siri is infringing, is there some way I can cut out the infringing part? How do I do that? Is it even possible to do that when all they are weights in a neural network? How do I change these numbers? I change those numbers? Who knows? How do I do that? And then you have the ethical considerations. So now other company has been found liable for patent infringement. They paid their damages and they cut out the part of the AI that infringes the patent. And they are continuing to do business. They're not getting as much business, but they're doing some business. And they drill a well that causes leakage of groundwater, permanently contaminating water for thousands of residents, because the court told them to take that part out. So now we have thousands of people with dirty water. Is that really what we want? Who pays for that? You can't really sue the court. So now the state steps in and says, hey, no. You have to give that, you have to put that back in there. Everybody, in fact, law says you have to have it in there. If you don't have that technology, you can't drill. So how's that? Do we have a compulsory license? What do we do with these AIs, right? And so that's some of the things that we can think about in the AI sphere. And it's important to understand these issues so that the proper legislations and policies can be implemented. You think about where we're headed with all this. And I talked to some lawyers. I just got back from Delhi. And I talked to a couple lawyers there doing software patents type of stuff. And they're telling me that with Startup India, there are a lot of cases that have been filed. And they're also telling me that the IPO now is granting patents in under a year. These patents are coming out. They're coming. And so we need to figure out, how are these things going to be enforced? Because I'm also told that the courts now are speeding up the resolution of cases. So things are taking off very quickly. I hope everybody's ready. Put on your seatbelt, and we'll see where it leads. So thank you for your attention. Okay, good.
Thank you, Mr. Merrill. Friends, we had really very, very interesting session for the last 1.5 hours. We have very qualified and distinguished speakers who has thrown light on different disciplines of the IPR issues. It is a good awareness program for all of you, most of the youngsters we have in the audience. I would thank each one of our speakers, Mr. Vivekanandan, Dr. Shahu, Dr. Vivekanandan, Dr. Shahu, and Dr. Lisa, and Mr. Gregory Merrill. On behalf of AMA, it's my pleasure to present to you small mementos. Thank you. I see a lot of youngsters here. It's a good learning for all of them. In fact, what I understand IPR, I come from an industry. I'm an entrepreneur having a chemical company. What I understand about IPR so far is we do some branding, so the brand is registered. That much only we did. Okay. But there are so many friends in the industry do small innovations, which they are not really aware of it. It is only in the last decade some awareness is cropping in Indian industry and Indian academia, and a lot of efforts are being put to promote awareness among the people, because as a society, we have to innovate. If we don't innovate, we don't progress in today's world. And whoever innovates, he needs to be protected, and he also needs to be promoted. Okay. But we are not aware, since we don't aware of the intellectual property rights, most of the time we do very good job, but we'll end up not taking the full benefit of it. Therefore, I would have seen more people from industry along with the students here, but there are few industry people here because they don't give a value to this actually. That's the problem, okay. And more, see, in AMA, last 13 years, under the aegis of Vijay Trivedi AMA Academy for Intellectual Property Rights, Jatin is putting a lot of efforts to bring many intellectuals from all over the world. Today, if you see, you find people from all over the world, okay, to bring awareness among the Ahmedabad mass. We all should be aware of our own rights, particularly intellectual property rights, so that we can be benefited. This is what I understand it. I also learned today a lot from all the speakers. Thank you, sir, for all of you, for giving us good insights. Thank you for all, for your very active participation.